Oi, oi, obligo, zero, think I said it right. All right. Welcome. Welcome, everyone. Oh my god. Holy. Holy titty sprinkles. Right. So, we got a lot to get through. Page 171 up to page 195. We've got a lot to get through. And then there's a video I want to do. Whoops. There's a video I want to do called Why Werewolves Are Terrible Predators. And I'm genuinely curious. And the reason I'm curious is because what werewolf are you talking about in particular? Because I would agree there like a lot of them when it's just the big scary monster. Yeah, it would be a terrible predator. How is it hunting anything, right? And depending on what weaknesses it has. Because there are all kinds of like ones where it's not just silver. And I think silver is already silly enough as it is. But yeah. So I very much am curious, like, okay, what ones you looking at? So I'm very curious what this video will be. And yeah, we'll look into it. Yeah, let's finish off. We gotta finish off chapter 12, and then we can do all of chapter 13, and get up to where we are, which is the start of chapter 14. These were the tough ones to rewrite, because it's all about, like, this is a lot of, like, heavier foundational stuff being placed in, right? There's not a lot of action. There's a lot of people talking and explaining things. Like, naturally through, like, they're not just lore dumping, like, oh yeah, and this means that, and that's, you know, that's not what's happening here, because they're not talking to an outsider. This is insiders talking to each other, and about, like, things that are going on, right? So there's a lot more of, like, having to put together the context of what's being said and what it actually means and everything. You know, you'll see when we get through it. So let's start off with a doozy, shall we? All right. I will not fall for your baiting tongue, bitch, for they are the words of a weaker moon. Sarah let out a soft laugh as her playful teasing had clearly roused the competitive spirit within him, and thus he would be more wired to respond. This, however, brought a scowl from Michael, who looked ashamed at both of them, but the wrecker simply furrowed his brow and glared back. Got something to say, pup? Michael simply shook his head and turned to walk away, leaving the pair behind and joining the crowd walking down the street. The plan was a simple one, with Michael going into the local dive that was to be their meeting spot alone, with the two others following a short time later. The meeting had been requested on neutral ground, and specifically inside the city limits to prevent any accidents or free usage of shifting in the boons of their kind. Thus, a small diner that kept to the old traditional style was selected, as neither tribe had control of it. He wasn't sure how the Embracers learned about his meeting with Meraxis, but apparently they had explicitly requested this meeting. At least that is what the council told him, and thus why he was currently trudging ever closer to the diner. Said eatery was known as the Hungry Pup, and had a stylized wolf pup for its mascot, carrying a tray of various cuts of meat. In the window on the side of the building, and on the ground floor door itself, was the bold proclamation of best meats in town, which was partially why it was chosen. The only true oddity of the place was that it was actually located on the second floor of the building it was in. Thus those who wished to eat here had to climb up the stairs before entering the diner properly. Given the mascot outside, Michael had to assume there was an additional reason for choosing this establishment. It wasn't as if wolf iconography was rare within Rosentia. After all, the birth of the Republic was shrouded in myth in the guardian wolves of old. Yet he had a feeling there was more to it than just any random lupine-themed eatery throughout La Pratia. Steadily he opened the door on the ground floor and began to ascend the stairs, before he noted that the sound of each step seemed to amplify his footsteps. Intended or otherwise, it would make getting up here without being heard a miracle of the highest order, or if he were a spaya. Once he came to the first landing, he turned and followed the stairwell till he came to that door, to the door, emblazoned with the same mascot and tray of meat. He also noted the glass was frosted to offer some privacy for looking inside. Yet even so, he could hear the place had a lot of people inside. A lot of people gathered. Oh, let's do that. Gathered, which made him nervous. Was he about to walk into the den of another wolf and be torn to shreds? Hesitantly, he opened the door and stepped inside, before the retro decor hit his eyes immediately, and the smell of food instantly made his stomach growl. Whew. Split this. That was a very big paragraph. I'm going to split this paragraph. He was ashamed to admit it, but his mouth was watering, too, and he swallowed hard before stepping over the threshold and inside the diner. It was a vibrant setting of reds and whites, with even the waitress... Whoops. I spelled currently wrong. I only saw it now. It was a vibrant setting of reds and whites, with even the waitress currently in a short red dress and red cap, as she took a tray of food over to her table where a man and woman were waiting. Once the food was delivered, she turned to face Michael with a warm smile on her face, while the ranger took in the details of her vintage uniform, complete with white apron. "Morning, sugar. What can I do for you?" His focus came back to her, and he gave a quick nod of his head to give acknowledgement to her greeting. "I be here to meet up with a friend. Said he need a place." This brought a smile to the waitress' face before she pointed off to a booth nearby. "He said you would be by. I made mention of the accent." "That's him over at the booth by the window." With her words, Michael turned to look, and there sat a man drinking a glass of orange juice and giving a wave of his hand. As he moved towards the booth and was passing the waitress, he gave a curious sniff, pretending to try and clear his nose a little, prepare himself to meet his friend. It's when he realized the waitress was in fact a Wolverine, just as he, and as he turned to say something, she simply smiled and gave him a nudge in the side. Realizing he had been caught, and she had done the exact same to him, he sheepishly retreated towards the booth. The man he was meeting had his back turned to the door, and he could not get an accurate sense of the height, for the man was seated. For he was seated. He did at least note the black hair, and even more so, the gray eyes, as he came around and settled into the booth opposite him. "You really should order something. Have a plate coming, and they aren't kidding when they boast of the best meats in town." "I should know. I've checked thoroughly." Michael furrowed his brow and folded his arms over his chest as his eyes remained locked on the man, who seemed far too casual for such an affair as this. "She be one of yours?" The man raised a brow and carefully set aside the orange juice he was nursing before he tilted his head. "Who? Oh, the waitress, right. No. While we share the same sin, she's not of my tribe. Her mate runs the kitchen here. It's a family-owned business, you see, and his sin is gluttony, so he learned how to make some damn fine food. Michael slowly leaned back in the booth and turned his head to look around the rest of the room, which brought a soft chuckle from his host. What to be so funny? Oh, you are. Not used to clandestine meetings, clearly. The man then used his hand to lightly flick the side of the napkin holder on the outer edge of the table. Michael paused for a brief moment to take note that the metal covering around it was very shiny and could be used as a mirror. The revelation that the man was being far more cautious than he had first thought put him on edge, as he couldn't help but turn his gaze to look around. Across the open floor, in a booth on the opposite wall and slightly back, were two police officers, who were chatting amongst themselves over cups of coffee. However, as he watched, it was clear that both of the officers were actually side-eyeing him, watching him with careful interest writ large on their faces. One officer was thinner than the other, with a fair skin tone, black hair, and dark brown eyes, while the other had dark skin, was built like a tank with a clean-shaven head and light brown eyes. Sitting behind the officers in a corner booth was an elderly woman, carefully reading a book while her food was ever more carefully eaten. Yet her blue eyes, contrasted sharply against the silvery hair that proved her age, were looking at him from time to time. This made him all the more tense as he could feel other eyes on the back of his head, from who knows how many others in the room. His nerves only intensified when the door opened as Sarah and Gregory entered the diner. The man opposite of Michael casually raised a hand and snapped his fingers before he called out, Come in, Sarah. You and your compatriot should make yourselves comfortable at that booth right beside the door." This confused the two of them, who looked from each other towards Michael, who shook his head and looked about the room. Message received loud and clear, and thus the two of them tensed up before carefully settling into the booth they had been assigned. Both chose the same logical response and crowded one side of the booth to keep their backs against the wall as they realized they had walked directly into a trap. "I thought we'd be meeting in a neutral place, but I suppose leave it to an embracer." The man rolled his eyes at Michael's words and soon enough cut him off as he tapped his fingers on the table. "Oh, relax. This is neutral. Not a single other wolf in here is from my tribe. Right, everyone?" The man made a grandiose display of waving an arm to indicate the entirety of the diner, which brought a few rolled eyes and dismissive groans. "Though I suppose we should begin with a proper introduction. Now you also know everyone here is kin, so no need to couch words in euphemism and secrecy." Michael couldn't help but grumble before he turned his focus to the man opposite him, though he felt the creeping sensation of a knife getting ever nearer his back. There was nothing for it, though. He just had to trust that Sarah and Gregory were watching out for him, while he would be watching the door. "That'd be a fine place to start, aye? You know me name somehow, and you wanted me here for some reason. I canna fathom why. I be just a third Talon guilty." Slowly he crossed his arms and continued to stare intently at his table guests, trying his best to use the law enforcement training he had to suss out the truth of his mannerisms and expressions. Anything he could glean would be of use in a situation where he was on the back foot so heavily. "Well, that can come in a moment, pup. For now, as far as proper introductions go, my name is Jonathan Olfither, Einvalder of the Glass Den Aether, also known as Smiling Wolf Studios." Those gray eyes focusing squarely on Michael to see what he would do or how he would react. Said reaction was to be surprised that the tribal chieftain of such an infamous tribe was the one that would be meeting him here. "I be surprised that ye are the chieftain and nae some diplomat. But also you be from one of the most depraved of all the tribes. The embracers always disappoint. Jonathan sighed at that and leaned back in the booth, but it was the fair-skinned officer that instead stood up and pointed at Michael. Who the fuck are you to judge us? All you disciplined are the exact fucking same, ain't ya? All judgmental idiots, holier than thou, in your ivory towers hiding from the real fight, and too scared to get your hands dirty. All the while we fight on the front fucking lines for your sake too, you prick. The officer was starting to move across the room, but his partner stood and grabbed his shoulder to cease his advance, while Jonathan glared at him. Relax, Anthony. He is biased, there's no doubt. They're just words and spoken by an ignorant third talent to boot. Michael raised his hands up in a show of attrition before he offered a nod of his head. I apologize, lad, but you must admit your lot do fall to the sins far merit than mine. Jonathan shook his head though and tapped at the table more. I do not concede that point at all, actually. The disciplined fall just as easily, though their route comes from the misery, self-loathing, and depressive loneliness they feel. Unlike you, I do not speak from ignorance. I was among the disciplined for many decades and saw it firsthand. Just feels like y'all are making Maraxus work harder on your behalf. Do you not see the dangers of rolling in your sins? Jonathan instead growled a bit and placed both hands on the table. Your ignorance is astounding. We're on the front line. Do you understand what that means? What do you think the Smilers, the Demons, the Hellhounds, the Fellbirds, the Rot Bears, and the likes are going to apply their sin at? Do you get many of them out in the woods? Or do you think, just maybe, they will find where they can indulge in their wickedness the easiest? The Embracers may indulge in some sin to keep our morale up, but we're fighting for your sake as well. My tribe alone has one of the greatest track records for dealing with threats from the Hells in the entire history of this world. His voice was rising in intensity as he leaned forward and furrowed his brow, glaring his challenge directly at Michael. I again apologize. It may be me reason for coming to make a fight between us. Mr. Oldfither leaned back in the booth and grumbled some. You'd fucking lose for sure. I have more deeds to my name alone than your entire tribe. Your tribe even gets its funding through donations of mine. Or did you not suspect John Wolfwood at all? The name didn't ring familiar to Michael, but he heard Sarah audibly groan before she called out. Are you serious? By the Ander, I've been wishing you hail and hearty tidings for years now. Jonathan didn't even look back, but gave a snap of his fingers. You see? Now, I get the difference in philosophy, but you need to remember that we're on the same side here, and I want to build that bridge between us. We're all Wolverine here. We're all devout worshippers of Maraxus and the Aspects. Sarah gave a huff, and this brought Jonathan's attention around with a scowl. Oh man, the mute button didn't work. Oh, I forgot. I took off the mute button because of Mecha Chameleon. My bad, chat. My bad. My bad. I have to reapply it. I'll make sure I get that done later. Don't be so cocky. The Sanctuary got another angel donator as well, so I can easily switch my prayers over just fine. Surprising to both of them, John simply let out a laugh and leaned back in against the booth, while his eyes looked straight into Michael's own. Now I grant you that the disciplined have more time to spend in care of the forests and in company of the Ander. This is a good thing. I'm not so stubborn as to believe that either side has the completely correct answer to a multi-universal spanning problem. All I want is a bridge between, so we can discuss the situation amongst kin as kin. Does that make sense? The ranger shook his head and threw his hands up before sighing. I understand the sentiment, lad, but I just be a third Talon. That brings me back to an initial quandary of mine. Why me? I canna speak for me hater. Sarah out there would be mere like to have that responsibility, nae me. Jonathan nodded his head and scratched his cheek before he reached into the fine trench coat of his and set something down on the table. I suppose I'll reveal a bit of my hand. You see, Michael, I overheard you speaking back at your hater. Sarah back there was grilling you for further information as I walked past you and overheard a specific name. Slowly, Jonathan flipped the object over to reveal it was a drawing, one that the ranger immediately knew. Slowly he looked up from the drawing and looked at the man, who was now smiling and leaning back in the booth. That be your Mikander, ain't it? Correct. And so you can imagine when I overhear his name alongside the great Dragon Emperor himself, I'm going to be very curious. This got the rest of the diner to suddenly fall far quieter as they leaned in closer. So tell me, what did you and Meraxes speak about? What involvement did my Mikander Jorax have in that talk? It's Jerox. Ugh, I fucked up his name. I called him Jorax. I literally swapped the A and the O. Oops. No, not in the document. No, not in the stuff. No, I swapped it IRL. Oops. Look, before you get excited, you ain't gonna like me answer. I be sworn to nae speak o what Jerox role was. Temperor himself commanded me to such. This brought a raised eyebrow from John and the groans of the others in the diner. Come off it. Oops. Alright. Come off it. I don't believe this bullshit. No way in hell he actually met the Emperor. Anthony called out before he started to tap at the cap of his police uniform. I'm the Jorax. I speak for the wolves. Yeah, Jerox. I swear to for all to Ander, it be true. I met the divine dragon Emperor Meraxes, or may he strike me day and knee. This then made Jonathan grumble and lean forward in the booth before placing his hands out onto the table and carefully glaring into Michael's eyes. And what did the Emperor want with you? As you said, you are a third Talon. You can understand my interest, but what makes the Emperor thusly interested in you? Michael looked about the room with all eyes, even that of the cook. Oops. Oh, he didn't come out from the kitchen. The kitchen's, it's one room. Michael looked about the room with all eyes, even that of the cook who turned from the griddles, and his wife who carried a tray of food to the table. It was a large bounty of bacon, sausage, eggs, biscuits, and sawmill gravy, which all added to the heavy growl coming from the ranger's belly. Laddie, that ain't playing fair like. Jonathan just smirked to himself as he took a piece of the bacon and began chewing on it. Timing was impeccable, though. Mr. Olfither leaned back and gave a nod of his head over to the cook and the waitress, who were now leaning against the counter of the diner. It was clear that they were all eagerly waiting to hear what the ranger had to say. All right, fine. Look, laddie, and well, all o' ye here. I am nae opposed to working with ye. Y'all are kin. I just fear... His words trailed off, and Jonathan just nodded his head once more. You're afraid of falling. Trust us. Trust us, we all are. As I said, I appreciate that the disciplined have time to dedicate themselves to the Andor nature itself. I believe we need both sides of this coin to fulfill the divine mandate properly. But I'm 202 years old now, and I have been an embracer for 153 of those years. I could not abide by the suffocating nature of your creed and wanted a better way. With that age comes wisdom, as well as why I am not as eager to bring teeth and claws to what are just the words of a youngling. As he spoke, the man slowly took a sausage link and offered it over towards Michael, who graciously accepted it. Johnny boy, you're way too lenient. We don't need them to hide behind us and preach from the safety of their woodland dens. Anthony, the light-skinned officer, once more spoke up. This time he was answered by the old woman who settled in the corner of the room as she straightened herself up in the booth. Young man, don't be so hard on them. I'm with Jonathan on this. The fact that we are kin should trump the methodology by which we seek to save our souls. Talks like this go a long way to reminding us all that we serve the divine mandate. Michael had turned as she spoke, looking at the literal embodiment of age as the curly silvered... Yes. Oh, the embodiment of age. Sorry, that line made me smirk when I was writing it, and now it's made me smirk again going back through. Looking at the literal embodiment of age as the curly silvered hair framed a face of wrinkles and a nose that held aloft spectacles. Gregory surprised the ranger as he now spoke up. I can agree to such terms. We don't need to be friends that come around each other's den. We can at least acknowledge a noble goal shared. Jonathan once more took the reins after the wrecker had spoken. Well said, our incredibly large kin. Now, though, I believe you were about to tell us all why Meraxus wanted to meet with you. Well, I can't say exact unless... Sarah did not let him finish and instead interjected. Go ahead, Mikey. It's important, and though I'm loath to admit it, the threat is most likely to affect our kin here. This absolutely blew Michael away, given that Sarah was more of a hardliner for keeping each wolf to their own den. Well, all right then. The diner suddenly became far quieter again as everyone leaned in to listen carefully. Meraxus came to deliver unto me a prophecy. Though he said hisself that it were just logical deduction. It were to come to pass, but even so, if it were to come to pass. There be a nae wolf coming. Rather, they will awaken sometime soon. And 'tis one heralds a great change upon our beautiful Saturn. What sort of change? Jonathan was carefully eating his food while he watched the ranger, who was trying to find the right wording for it. Well, 'tis feller has resisted a change. That awakening, as it were, for a long time. A nearly impossible length of time, in fact. And the dam can nae hold any longer. Meraxus wants me to help ease the transition as best me skills can, to help teach him our ways. Mertentat, he suspects this be the beginning of the unveiling, as it were. The room remained quiet as everyone processed what that truly meant. The officers turned back to their coffee and idly tilted the cups, while the old woman folded her hands on the table and looked at them. The couple that he had seen getting their food first were lightly playing at the scraps on the plate as the possibilities all sunk in. At last it was John that spoke up once more. He thinks it will lead to the truth of our existence being inescapable? Michael simply nodded his head, and the elder Yalderskald slumped back in the booth and took a deep breath. Fuck. May have to accelerate my work even more. The somber feeling throughout the room was settling in steadily as they all came to grips with the idea that they would be the ones living under the unmasking of their kind. It was always a certainty, especially after the Fifth World War just 11 years ago. Technology was too pervasive. There were too many eyes, too many chances to get caught and be unable to do anything about it. While the major divide in philosophy was between the disciplined and embracers, a second divide had also settled in. Many amongst the Vordir were practicing containment of information, while others were doing their best to ease the blow for when the truth was undeniable. Yeah, it's funny you say that. You call what ye do work, lad? Smiling Wolf runs that carnal porn shite, and... Jonathan raised a brow at him, and this made Michael pause a bit. I nae mean offence, but I question the effectiveness o' it. You've seen some of it already. That human you brought into the Aether, who I note also left intact. She expressed she had seen our work and was a fan of it. That be anecdotal at best. Do you really think it'd be wise to put that smut out there? Michael was exacerbated at the Einwalder's words and the quickness at which he had pointed out Jennifer and her odd sensibilities. I do. Part of softening the fallout is getting people to register that werewolf does not automatically mean mass graves and limbs everywhere. I find trying to forge an attraction to them instead to be very effective in that regard. Michael was dumbstruck and threw his hands up in the air. How? By making it so that ye wee lasses are ravaged by a monstrous beastie, or to menfolk getting jumped and... Let me stop you there. You clearly haven't seen our work, nor am I suggesting you do so, but let me fill you in on the truth about what I do. Every single time a Wolverine is involved in the shoots, every single time a werewolf is on screen, they're not engaging in rape or excess violence. I'm not speaking of high art here. Not speaking of high art here, mind you. But simply story beats. A woman is being harassed and chased by some men. The group stumbles upon a werewolf who chases off the men. Maybe a slash or two at them before checking on the woman. The two of them hit it off, they bang. Not some great novella or wondrous production, but that subtlety is not lost in the subconscious mind. There's not a single one of our catalog where our kin, or even the false sulfur we use, are engaged in acts of hostility or cruelty. That matters, and the people that are partaking in our products are being manipulated in that regard. Propaganda isn't just for governance, Little Ranger. He didn't know what to say. The sheer audacity of the man's claims seemed absurd. Yet how did he argue against them? He didn't have a giant sampling of their clients, and the one he did know for sure had proven the case for him. Can that nae be done a better way? Jonathan rolled his eyes and tapped at the table once more before he leaned forward and snatched up a sausage link. Oh, so it's the content itself that is the objectionable part? So you'd be totally fine if Smiling Wolf Studios were putting on the current hottest production of the fucking year and made a rose in its thorns? Look, what thought it can be dismissed as fanciful historical drama. It'd just be a whimsical look at the founding myth of the Republic itself. They are retelling the exact history 1-to-1. I know many of the production team working on the project. They have a lot of Yalderskalds. Michael was floundering and looked over desperately at Sarah, who groaned some. Look, Mikey has a point. The carnal nature of your work does leave a bad taste in the mouth, and it's because of the association with lust. Not to put too fine a point on it, but it is glorifying one of the sins of the damned hells that are trying to claim our souls. Jonathan turned, tossing the sausage in his mouth to eat it down quickly, as he threw his arm over the corner of the booth and glared at Sarah. I grant you it is lustful. Well, this is absurd notion that any degree of sinful thought will inevitably lead to damnation is the exact thought process that causes so many discipline to fall. You all cut yourself off so hard from sin that you feel any transgression, regardless of how minor, is a huge betrayal of all your ideals and spiral out of control. Fuck's sakes, one of the many reasons I left the discipline was because a fucking spaya fell in love with a human and thought it was wicked lustful thoughts that did it and fell to become a smiler. Well, Johnny, this time the dark-skinned officer spoke up and scratched his cheek. We don't call you the king of porn for nothing. Bah, whatever. This is part of what I was discussing with your ater. I wanted to bring more of a jovial feeling to the proceedings. People shown to have little fear of our kind. This is where the hotel comes into play. At those words, Michael couldn't help but tense up, which caught Jonathan's eyes instantly, but he played it off for the moment. The hotel is going to be the site of a game that our clientele can view through live streams. It will be a system to figure out who the wolves amongst the humans are, with the usual sexual encounters between the werewolves and players. Are you just trying to brag about it, eh? Michael had recovered, but Jonathan was still looking at him directly. It's not a brag. It's a method to further ease the revelation of us. Gamifying it will engage more receptors within the brain and solidify the propaganda we want to instill in them. For this, though, I needed to make sure your ater was aware of the proceedings and the location so as not to interfere. You may not like it, but if you want to soften the blow of the mundane world discovering the Wolverine are real, you need to get their mind off the fear of it. If that means there's less panic and screaming because of a stirring in their pants, then so be it. Gregory suddenly spoke up and covered his face. Bet that went over well with the Einwalder and Rogenwalder. Jonathan just let out a laugh and waved a dismissive hand. As well as could be expected. I'm sure they don't want a war on their hands. But I am curious about something else, Mikey. Which made the ranger tense up in his seat as the man leaned more intensely forward. When I mentioned the hotel, you suddenly looked nervous and on edge. Will that be because... Better think of an excuse quickly. Or just tell me the truth of it. Do you know our hotel? Michael was desperately flailing here for an answer and searching for anything to say. Perhaps you've been there recently. Say in a meeting with some very important people. The reaction that the ranger gave was all the confirmation that the man needed as he leaned back in the booth. Mikey realized that the Einwalder of the Glass Den was not an idiot and was piecing together things through the tangential bits of information he was gathering. He felt it deep in his soul that the man knew the secret he was sworn to protect, all but confirmed as Jonathan suddenly smiled and narrowed his eyes in a smugness he had yet to display before. How very interesting. Thank you kindly, Michael. The ranger swallowed hard but tried to keep his composure as best he could. He wanted to try and divert the conversation, but it was clear he didn't have the poker face for this level of scrutiny. Clandestine meeting was an absolute understatement. Even more so as the rest of the diner had started to gather in closer, as if wanting to be in on the grand secret Jonathan had pried from him. Yet it could always get worse, as the universe once more proved to him in full. He could hear the sound of footsteps on the stairs outside, before the door to the diner swung open and allowed a new patron entry. Even as the waitress turned to see who it was and start to welcome them inside, the ranger knew instantly. Damn throat demons. Hold on. Taking a drink. Get some agua. Alright. Damn throat demons. Alright. Even as the waitress turned to see who it was and start to welcome them inside, the ranger knew instantly, and thus only a single word exploded in his mind as recognition came. Shite. That is the end of chapter 12, Cracks. Alright. So, you guys will have to remember back to the start of chapter 12 from last time if you can recall what all happened. Because the reason it was called Cracks was because of, the spirits checking in on William and noting that even the cracks on him are glowing. That the things are breaking down. It's getting harder and harder to hold everything in. Yeah, what'd you think of the first part? Part 1 of 3 of the talk at the diner. Gotta get a proper gander at those whoops. Jennifer will be like, throw me to the wolves and I'll come back pregnant. Okay. I said this is going to be the hardest part to rewrite everything because of all the information that's given, but not given in a way to explain through. So you have to use context through it. You have to use context through all the bits and pieces. All right, chapter 13. Chapter 13, Converging Paths. William took a few more deep breaths to calm himself as he drove through the streets of La Pratia. As distance increased from the encounter, his mood settled and he was able to focus once more to slip into the schedule he wanted to keep. He wanted to come up with a logical reason for everything, yet he was seemingly in a contest for how absurd the world could truly be. But what could he do about it now, besides just brace himself for the next twist? Oh, excuse me. Oh my god, what the fuck? What can you do about it now, besides just brace himself for the next twist? After all, the woman he wanted to be with the most was apparently a shape-shifting bird. Just more puzzle pieces added to the pile, and set tantalizing him within view, but out of reach of the truth. I just think they're neat. I mean, that's usually his excuse. Even when he got one piece answered, it did little to clarify all the others, but it at least shed some light on what could be the truth. Hopefully the voice in his head and the wolf he just saw were more of the same, or, at the very least, could be answered by that ranger. Another growl from his stomach made him wince, and he sighed before drawing his thoughts into more immediate focus in the search for food. He only lived a short distance from the diner he had seen, and was all the more grateful for it when his stomach contracted once more to its audible misery. Just hang in there. This isn't like back in the war. There's plenty of food to be found. Maybe he should have eaten more last night instead of trying to stretch out his foodstuffs to drain right as he was leaving for the new house. There was nothing worse than moving with a bunch of perishable food that could go off, especially if something unexpected happened at the new house, like the fridge not working. Fortunately, he was not to befall such woes and kept the food minimal until the big move. This is when he at last saw the charming little mascot outside and pulled into a nearby parking lot. Normally it serviced one of the larger stores, but it was just a short walk to get from here to the diner, thus a perfectly acceptable place to settle in at. All around his chosen parking spot were so many other cars of far newer make, he couldn't help but cherish the more boxy style of the old muscle cars. It certainly stood out like a sore thumb, but there was nothing for it, and he made his way down the sidewalk, his eyes keeping the diner's mascot in view the whole way. That strange little mascot, acting as the goalpost for his search, certainly brought a little smirk to his face. He wasn't normally all that interested in things that could be described as cute, but it did have a charm to it that clearly worked on him. The rather fantastical claim certainly helped as far as his ailing stomach was concerned, and even brought a new quandary to his mind. If he really was one of these werewolves, the so-called Wolverine, will he have a special connection to normal wolves? Actually, what about the guardian wolves of myth? He dismissed the idea even under evidence of the werewolves that the NDA cataloged, but these Wolverine had powers. Could they be the actual furred predators from the very origin of Rosentia's rise as a republic? The initial skepticism was placed because all matters of werewolves the NDA knew showed they could only take either a human or wolf-like two-legged hybrid form, but none could be a pure wolf. This strange thought process, inspired by the tangential musings from seeing the mascot, almost had him miss the door, but soon enough he turned and opened it before following the signs up the stairs. A quaint little frosted glass door once more adorned with the mascot and continuing the bold, nigh impossible to prove claim of its meaty excellence. As he opened said door and stepped into the diner, the old-fashioned aesthetic hit his eyes and sensibilities a fraction before the smell. He found himself giving a nod at the former, and then suddenly a deep rumbling growl from his stomach at the latter. The place had such an inviting atmosphere, with even the cook just behind a counter and not sequestered in some closed-in kitchen. He too bore retro garb with a small white hat on his head and well-worn apron with a few smatterings of grease from his work at the griddle and pans. The waitress who was turning to acknowledge him was dressed in vibrant reds and whites of retro garb, and had been leaning against a booth where two men were speaking. In fact, much of the diner had clearly gathered close to that booth, and were currently starting to move back to their abandoned plates and drinks, including a pair of La Pradia police officers, who were casting strange looks over at him. It was only after processing this that his attention landed on the man facing towards the door, and a new sensation of bewilderment flooded his face. "Morning, sugar. What can I get for you?" Fucking YouTube, Jesus. Right. "More sugar? What can I get for you?" The woman's words were completely lost on him for a time as he raised an accusatory hand and pointed at the man sitting in the booth. "What are you doing here?" It was a stupid question in the heat of the moment, and only served to draw all the more attention to William standing in the doorway as he glared at the ranger. For his part, Michael gave a cough and then scratched his cheek as he thought through the situation as quickly as possible. He had to give special consideration to the fact everyone in there was a Wolverine, thus how should he best spin this? "Oi, laddie, just be meeting with a friend, and getting some breakfast. You know, the rangers need to eat tea." Part of the problem was how he was going to handle the waitress, who was already moving towards the agent, and likely to call out. As that problem was currently rattling in his head, Jonathan turned to look, drawing his right arm up and over the top of the booth seating, and looked directly at the man. This was not just some glance, but his eyes were tracing all over, the gift of his cast to lock it into memory forever and be accessed when he needed it. It was then he spotted it there on his hip. He could see the holster with a sidearm, and then across the belt there was an indent where a badge should be clasped. "And who's your friend, Mikey?" Jonathan asked as the waitress got ever closer to the man in the doorway, all while his movements became stiff as if his muscles were preparing themselves. It was clear that he had picked up on the nervousness within Michael's words and had come to the conclusion that the man was a threat. "Someone we should be aware of." William watched as the waitress came closer, a smile on her face, but one that was hiding her apprehension, a trait common in the cautiousness of wolves towards new things. That smile remained as she looked him in the eyes and gave a sniff, one that she played off as if suddenly disturbed by something, before she began to tilt her head. It was what Michael wanted to avoid, but had no way to control the situation, and thus surrendered in his mind, and quickly blurted out, Aye, that he be. You see, laddie, he be, well, to one I were speaking about afore, with the whole meeting ting." It was a desperate throw, and he had no idea how William was to react to the situation he found himself in, as the waitress began to turn. Jonathan himself raised a brow and cast his focus to the waitress, who shifted to the side and called out to the rest of the diner, "Bit strange, but he has the smell to him." This made William for a split second turn to sniff at himself, as if trying to suss out an odor, but then he realized something more pressing. Those blue eyes of his looked at each person in the diner with a sudden intenseness, subtle but tangible, as he regarded each and every person within the room. This was a truck slipping in to run away, and he needed to get the situation calmed quickly. "Care to have a seat here, Special Agent?" The emphasis on the title was important to try and give the room pause. "I was keen on ordering for myself. My friend here already done got himself some feed while he were waiting on me." William carefully scanned around the room, checking distances from himself to any potential threat, all while his right hand slipped down to rest on the grip of his pistol. That waitress had said something incredibly odd, and gave it as open acknowledgement to everyone in the room at once. This was combined with the knowledge everyone had been closely gathered just before he had entered, meant there was some cohesion between all of them. Thus it was decision time. Stay and try to talk, or turn and get out the ground floor door as quickly as possible to get into the populace down below. The motion with the man's grip was subtle, but Jonathan was no fool and could read the intentions in the man's actions. For himself, he knew how to handle situations in the mundane world should violence be called into action, and thus drew his left hand to where his memory of the knife for his food was placed. Even a butter knife, when wielded with enough force, could be dangerous. Yet unexpectedly, Michael had reached over the table and grabbed his wrist just short. "Nae need for that, both of ye. Come join us, Agent. I know ye were keen to ask me questions the other day, and, well, 'tis maybe better than just me stating it myself. Let us have that discussion 'tis morn while we all enjoy a meal together." William's eyes turned to the table with the ranger and the stranger, noting that the former was leaned over and likely preventing the stranger from doing something. If he bolted now, he could easily make it outside. But there was that voice. Am I to be ignorant forever? Not a command, nor suggestion, but once again lamenting the current state and thought process running through his mind. His focus also noted that the two police officers in a booth near the back Let me try this again. His focus also noted that the two police officers in a booth near the back had their hands lowered down to their hips, likely on their own firearms. If he were to try and run or draw his sidearm, he would likely put some of the innocent people at risk below. with knowledge the police here were directly aligned with the others in the diner, a bit of a gamble in logic, but seemed fitting given their focus and intent, he came to his decision. Slowly he brought his hand away from his holster and took a step further into the diner, ready to wade into the seeming conspiracy himself as he turned his focus back to the Ranger. I think I shall take you up on that offer. Though I must say, it seems I stumbled into the middle of something here. With a casual and slow walk, he made his way towards the table, watching as Michael leaned back in the booth and scooted over so that William could settle in beside him. He didn't protest, and instead simply slipped into the booth, his eyes now locking intently with Jonathan's own, who had never wavered from the glare at him. The man even gave a sniff of the air himself as he looked, though clearly a false act, to settle back into comfort on the padded seating. Aye, that ye have, Will. We were actually just discussing ye nae but a few minutes ago. William listened to what Michael had to say, but his eyes never left the stranger he now sat across from. Oh? Why would I be the topic of conversation? Some of the others within the diner were curious as well, but were rapidly putting the pieces together. William knew, though, that this man with the black hair and gray eyes was the single most dangerous person in the room, even taking into consideration that many, if not all, were likely like the Ranger, and thus likely to be something other than human. The sheer amount of pressure this stranger applied while remaining completely calm was staggering. None of the man's movements, from turning back around to leaning back in the booth, spoke of one in any worry or doubt what they could do if a situation became violent. It was also hard not to notice that the man hadn't spoken again once the Ranger had been baited on the hook and was forced to try and smooth the situation. Well, it'd be a wee bit... Michael scratched at his cheek a little and fumbled a bit for the right words to help ease this. How much do ye know religious matters, Agent? Matters of faith, or just religious knowledge in general, like? The agent's focus never drifted away from the man sitting opposite him, until he answered with calm clarity. His world may well feel like it was cracking at the seams, but his life experience made him used to exceptional levels of violence, and this tension in the air. It was something instinctual in him, even displayed when he was still just some teen that lied his way into service to seek revenge, and thus his calm collectedness now. I must admit I'm not well studied on the matter beyond tangential requirements for work. Michael scratched his cheek again and then looked over at William, who was still refusing to look anywhere else but at Jonathan. Ter be nae need to soften it. I be a firm believer in Meraxis. His words trailed off, and the statement made Agent Lowell want to look at him, to judge the intent on his face. That desire was trumped by the intensity of senses demanding he not look away from the man across the table. Isn't that the dragons and such? In a manner of speaking, I assure you there be a lot of people who believe in him. William let out a soft huff and placed his hands on the table before he spoke calmly and clearly, with enough volume to be heard by all those listening in. Yeah, I imagine there are a bunch of them in this very room. Michael tensed up some, and the man across the table suddenly began to smirk, with a barest hint of teeth in it. Oi, lad. What do you mean? William furrowed his brow as he tried to read the smirk, but gave answer to the Ranger's flailings. Or flailing. That flailing works better. What the waitress said caught me by surprise. When there were many in this room who were gathered close to this table, just as I entered. So just the closeness or familiarity, given there was no hostile aggression or chest beating. When I clocked what the waitress said and realized that with you here, and her declaration to the entire room, it meant everyone within earshot was a part of it. Given the size of this diner isn't enormous, Well, it isn't difficult to imagine the announcement was for everyone here. There's also the sniff. The waitress did it, and so did the man across the table, and this brought to mind our first encounter. Ah, well, yeah, so you did figure. He hadn't wanted to treat the agent like an idiot, but he didn't expect the man was forming the same connective patterns as Jonathan had been. Well, 'tis we're a meeting of sorts. To others here are nae associates of mine, so things be tense. But I was speaking with Meraxis, and he came. Oh, come on. I get there was some reason for you to try the whole. William sighed a bit and furrowed his brow, turning to side-eye Michael for a moment. Do you expect me to believe a god, especially one of the dragons, came to speak to you? It's not impossible, Agent. Your perception of things is just small. The man across the table suddenly spoke, and this snapped William's focus back to him. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Jonathan Olfither. Agent Lowell didn't want to respond at first, but as he had been in a staring contest with the man for near the entirety of his time here, he felt it proper to at least humor him. Special Agent William Lowell, NDA. At the last word, a groan went up around the diner, with the two most annoyed being the police officers, whose looks at him grew far sterner. It is also when the second officer, shorter and with fair skin, suddenly called out, "Oh yeah? What makes you so special?" Jonathan raised a hand to quiet the man before he leaned forward. Before that, I have a query of my own. Might I ask why you keep staring at me? The officer wanted to talk back, but sheepishly retreated into the booth, which further confirmed William's suspicions. Call it a hunch, but my instincts are telling me the single most dangerous person in this room is you. The statement made Mr. Olfither suddenly laugh and give a firm slap at the top of the table. Yet it wasn't he that answered, but Michael. Really? Even with your knowing about me and such? This made Jonathan laugh harder, but he was not alone, as others also stifled chuckles, or at least wore smirks on their face. Oi, I nae be saying I'm the greatest there be, but William at least knows what I am. Maybe so, but you aren't Jonathan. The dark-skinned officer said as he folded his arms over his chest and then leaned his side against the booth, now sitting with his legs towards Will's table. That agent has good instincts. They don't call Johnny Boy their Reaper Song for nothing. What the fuck? Your Reaper Song too? The exclamation came from a woman who was seated near the entryway door, and this brought some added chuckles throughout the diner. At last, Jonathan raised his hands up for silence and then looked at William once more. Right, well, I appreciate your instincts. Though I do want to echo the question, what makes you so special, Agent William? Why would Meraxis himself speak with my McCander and Michael here about you? Will could only raise a brow before Michael cleared his throat some and lightly tapped at the table. Well, I told ye, Lord Tut, it'd be about the prophecy. Or rather, more like logical deduction. That someone would come along and resist their true self to an absurd degree. William be that someone. This made Agent Lowell grumble a bit and lean back in the booth as he finally turned his gaze to Michael. I want to know something more pressing. That is the simple matter of why you believe what you do. This made one of the others, the man seated across from his wife, turn to look at the waitress and call out. I thought you said he was one of us. You scented him, right? Before the waitress could respond to defend herself, Jonathan raised his hand. She stated there was something off, and having scented the man myself, I understand her statement clearly. He does smell like one of us, but not totally. I had been ruminating on it for a time, but the smell I most associate him with is actually the scent of puppies before they have matured and grown into the truth of themselves. Look, I just want to understand why any of you in this room actually believe all the stuff that you do. Once more, Jonathan spoke up on behalf of everyone else. That is because it's an observable fact. Now please let the ranger... Observable by whom exactly? Just you? Mr. Oldfither nodded his head and lightly tapped at the table. That's correct. By all of us that are awoken, all of us that have merged the two halves of ourselves into one, blending the physical and spiritual into a single body. Do not know what you might know, but for us, the world has considerable things hidden out of sight of the mundane. Now please, Michael, what exactly are the parameters of the Emperor's deduction? William grumbled a bit, but he had to concede that he could be playing with a deck he had no way to confirm through his own two eyes. Well, you see, William here be having the dreams. Ye all are familiar with the ones I mean. This time the old woman in the corner spoke up after having placed her hands atop her closed book. That true? You having the dreams of the forest and the wolves? Perhaps I do. William spoke up quickly, and Jonathan looked over to the old woman. I believe that should have been a given, madam. It seemed to William that another piece of the puzzle was now solved, as the dream was clearly important to everyone in this room. Certainly they could all be in on the conspiracy to manipulate a single man they had no idea was coming to this diner, but that level of sophistry would be absurd. I remember you saying, Michael, in our talk in the woods, that your kind, which I believe it is safe to assume everyone in this room is the same, often uses manipulation and misdirection. How can I be sure, totally certain, that this is not another instance of that? Well, ye can't, laddie. We could show you much, but 'tis be nae the time for that. As for the prophecy, well, William, would you kindly tell him just how long ye been resisting? Was the length of time really that important? He supposed there was only one way to find out, unless he took a deep breath and looked back at Jonathan. 15 years, 2 months, 3 days. He remembered the exact eve he had them. It had only been when he truly delved into the past that he recalled so clearly that stark contrast from the terrible fighting to the restful dreams of the evening. I remember it was just after we landed on Isle Hattori, first amphibious landing operation I ever took part in. It was only at this moment that William realized that stoic and calm demeanor in Jonathan was masking something more. Before he was completely in control and at ease, but now he seemed to be a cornered thing desperate to retreat and assess a threat. This sudden epiphany, given his words, made the agent turn and look about the diner. Every last one of them was shuffled back away from him. The police officers had not reached for their sidearms, but were eyeing the exit and giving hushed consideration to going out a nearby window. The waitress had retreated behind the counter and laid a hand on the cook, who was edging them near the door to the back storage. The old lady in the corner had placed her book back into her bag and was sitting near the edge of the booth with her eyes darting towards one of the windows nearby. He didn't bother turning all the way back to see the couple behind him, but the man and woman near the door were suddenly tense and looking at him intently. Why? Is it really that bad? I'm a fool to think otherwise. The voice in his head made itself known once more, and he ushered it away, hoping it would listen. His words had not been so firm, and it was clear that fear was creeping into his voice, all while the thing in the back of his mind was pounding to try and get his attention. That headache was creeping in until the ranger finally spoke up. Okay, calm yourself, laddie. As for the rest of ye, that be exactly why. The Emperor nae named him specific like in the prophecy, The Divine Dragon Emperor told be wise, far beyond anything we could imagined. And he knew one day there would be one who commanded such discipline and control that they could resist for so long. Jonathan took a deep breath and carefully brought a hand to his face, gently rubbing it as he took in the information before a single word came from his mouth. Fuck. Aye? So let's take this slow and steady. Michael tapped his fingers on the table, thinking where best to start, but it was Jonathan that suddenly started to chuckle some. You alright, John? Just thinking how funny this is. You revealed information to an NDA agent before, and you have the gall to come at me about how I want to help our people. I can see part of the hypocrisy. Been minding that a lot lately, I have. But listen, he be kin, I. Jonathan gave a nod to his head and looked at William before offering a smile. Yes, we're in agreement on that. Prophecy or not, you are kin to us, and I will never turn kin away from help. I don't think you understand how truly reprehensible that is for one of us to do. Michael nodded his head in complete agreement. Hi, laddie. You won't find a more... Oh, sorry, not more. It's a mirror. A mirror. Well, we get in scraps, aye? That be the truth. But nay, a single one of us would turn away kin in need. That be damning them to the smilers. And that is an utter betrayal of our very being. Speaking of that, I only spoke with the NDA here to cover for killing that smiler at the visitor center. At the visitor center, John. It just turned out he were kin, and the woman were one of the Ravoran. Oh? So you're the one that killed the smiler. Victor was furious that you forest dwellers took that right from him, for it was going to be his gift to Jerox. William raised a brow and looked between the two men. I get this whole secret society. Not a secret society, different species. Fine, different species thing, but to openly speak about murdering someone in front of an NDA agent is... William's words lingered for a time before Sarah suddenly stood up. I just want to note that I was the one that took the smiler's head. Yes, with Mikey's assistance, and that of the human woman, but my axe claimed the fallen. William was blown away that the talk hadn't ceased on such a topic, but Jonathan looked squarely at him and nodded. You need to stop thinking as an NDA agent. I'm not saying you can't be one, but your life is different now. You're one of us. What you should also understand, and I'm sure our little ranger here informed you, is that smilers are a genuine evil in the world. They are, as far as anyone has attempted to test, irredeemable monsters and not our kin anymore. The only good one for the safety of the entire world is a dead one at our hands. If they should fall completely to the hells, it gets much worse from there. Now, before you think of sympathy, if that is your way, you can potentially bring them back from the abyss. But that requires them wanting to change. The problem is, why would the sin piloting the meat puppet want to stop? He be right, lad. That thing that attacked your base were a smiler, one reeking of lust he were, which happens to be Johnny's sin as well. Jonathan tapped at the table some and sighed a little as he looked at Michael before then turning to look at William. Before you get any ideas, I'm not a smiler. My camp just has some ideological differences from Michael's camp, but both camps serve the same theology. It would get complicated to explain it fully, but we differ on the functionality of our service to the divine mandate. Back to the smilers, though. They were a truly terrible sort, so named because of the awful sneering smirk on their faces. William nodded his head and sighed. Yeah, the ranger told me about them a bit. I also looked into what you said about Agent Baker, and you were correct. Michael gave a huff and crossed his arms over his chest. Of course I was. You said there was also someone that reminded you of being a smiler. Jonathan instantly perked up and leaned over the table. Who? Where are they? Michael raised a hand up. Relax. All in time, eh? For nay, let's help to ease him into the things, Murray. Jonathan grumbled a bit, but relented, and thus the ranger turned to Will fully. When our kind awaken, because of an old compact with Meraxus given as gift to our progenitor Sodoris, well, there be nae fine way to say it. That gift was corrupted, nae by any intention, but it were. And thus when we awaken, it be a violent thing of teeth and fury. Rage completely unfiltered and unrestrained. Thus the longer one were to resist that change, the more devastating it be. Therefore, if I am what you claim I am, and because I resisted for near half my life, William was letting the realization slowly dawn on him, and the idea of the voice being another part of who he truly was. This is when Jonathan nodded his head and spoke up. Exactly so. Sorry. Exactly so. Hence why we are concerned about what will happen when you become the real you. It was then the deep rumbling growl came from William's stomach once more, and he had to lightly rest a hand on it as he winced. The hunger pains would no longer tolerate being ignored unless he looked up at everyone sheepishly. I'm not saying I believe all of this. I've learned some truths that lead me to believe other statements that have been made. William looked over at the waitress and the cook, who were easing themselves back away from the back room door. I have a question of my own I would like answered. Some that put me in an awkward position, given they may well concern my mental well-being. For now, though, I'm starving and would like to see how that boast on your door holds up. The cook gave a smirk and a thumbs up, while the waitress smiled and slowly made her way around the counter and towards the table. It was when Michael also raised his hand and snapped his finger, not to gain attention, but as acknowledgement as well. Same for me, lass. I confess that smell were making me near to drooling. As for ye, William, Meraxus has a plan, and part of that plan for ye is for me to teach ye about us. He cannot be sure it will work, mind, but perhaps learning about us and yourself will help to ease the impact, as it were. The waitress placed out a couple menus for them, and the pair began to browse it quickly before Mr. Oldfither spoke once more. I am curious of something, though, Ken. When were you born? Does that matter? It absolutely does. So people have special compact with Manny, the moon. Or perhaps you have heard people call her Luna or Siva. Depending on what phase Mani is in when we are born, be it day or night, we are gifted certain abilities and a particular role within our culture. Now, I have a hunch based off what you said before, and the specificity with which you did, but you could confirm that for me. William raised a brow and looked at the man before turning his gaze back down to the menu. Well, it was Novus 25th, 1990, on Remembrance Day. Jonathan leaned back in his seat and then closed his eyes for a moment. He channeled his cast's gift of recall, which unfolded to him like a vast archival library to peruse. In it he could smell and hear and see all those things tucked away in his memory, kept safe for when he needed them, and thus now searched through the wings of it in his mind. Many Alderskalds had varying ways of visualizing or internalizing such a gift, especially when it came to handling the darker moments in life. The problem with being able to remember everything is that it included all the bad and traumatic things too. Thus, learning to properly lock them away was key. Jonathan learned long ago to keep such sourness in decrepit wings of rarely visited shelves that often collected dust. It wasn't that the Alderskald could recall everything in an instant, but that their memory of what they did was perfect. Thus they could cope with locking away certain things. Here now he was searching for something harmless, the special almanac that dictated the exact breakdown of the moon's phases. The mundane world assigned... How goes the book? We're reading through it right now. Hold on. The mundane world assigned far stricter notions on exacting phase composition, but in terms of the compact with money, there was a bit more wiggle to be found. For example, the full moon truly lasted only 4 minutes and 37 seconds, but for the compact and naked eye, it appeared full for 3 days. The new moon was similar in exacting nature of 3 minutes and 15 seconds, before any trace of soul's light touched it. For the Wolverine, it lasted an entire day before they could see the faint glint along the edge. The halves were a day each, and that left the most common 2 phases that lasted 12 days when combining both their waxing and waning iterations. It was in this moment that he came to the answer, and thus smiled broadly before leaning over the table and extending a hand out to William. The agent looked at the hand and then slowly took it in his before giving it a shake as Jonathan proudly called out, It is with pleasure that I am the first to greet one born a single eve before the full moon. I welcome you, William Lowell, as a fellow Yalderskald of the Gibbous. All right, let me drink some before we continue. Oh my goodness sakes. My goodness sakes. Samantha had no reason to be here today, but she needed a breather from her family and the deluge of knowledge they were trying to shove into her noggin. Cracking the egg, they called it, and she had to agree that it gave a splitting headache to her. So many different topics, so many intricacies, so many secrets she now had to internalize. That wasn't even getting into this whole divine mandate business, a sudden and heavy burden placed upon her shoulders atop the mantle of feathers she would soon wear as her skin. That latter concept alone was making her head spin, but it was when the discussion turned to the Smilers and the Revoran equivalent, the Glass Eyes, that she couldn't sit idle. By the way, that's 100% what I've decided on for the Smiler equivalent of the Revoran are the Glass Eyes, because it's the dead, lifeless look in their eyes, and Revoran are renowned for their eyesight. So Glass Eyes is their term for a Smiler when it comes to Revoran. And only if they see other Revoran, I should say. If they see a Revoran Smiler, they call it a Glass Eye. If they see a Wolverine Smiler, it's just a Smiler. Each one of the Vordir has a term for their equivalent of a Smiler. She had told her mother and father about the mannerisms of Lapradia's NDA commander, and Lady Baker echoed the same words of worry and caution as the Ranger had. Yet she knew William would not condemn someone with just the warnings provided. She took it upon herself to gather some evidence, be it of the truth of his fell status or just being a corrupt piece of shit. Thus she found herself at the moment looking through a few files in the archive, making a few notations and cross-referencing various materials throughout. A puzzle dropped into her lap by that Ranger. If she had to admit, it wasn't so bad. After all, there was something pleasing about solving a mystery. At first, she wanted to protect William in all of this, especially given that Michael was clearly afraid of him. She also noted in his messages that he was becoming more worried about things, and though she hung on every word, that same attention is what allowed her to notice the concern within him. Now, while still concerned for William, she wanted to help him by looking into this potential threat, and was already digging deep. She barely scratched the surface and already could see the telltale traces of rot within, and this made her far more apprehensive about going deeper still. Some of them were small things, like supply discrepancies, but others were like if someone had tried to erase knowledge of a person, but forgot to extend the outermost roots. Those supplies were the tip, showing added food shipments and deliveries marked for prisoners on logs, but no such prisoners existed at the alleged black sites housing them. Naturally, given the mythical and treacherous NDA filing system, such an oversight was easily understood, but this begged the question of where the additional food went. There was an innocent explanation in which a base was engaging in its own small corruption and overstocking their supplies. That idea held up until she found notations for janitorial logs at some of the affected sites, indicating that a cleanup had taken place. When cross-referenced with custodial, she found that these cleanups were not logged with the capital at all, and thus custodial weren't involved in the slightest. In fact, she knew one of the people on the janitorial listings, and he was one of the medical examiners for this very command post, and not authorized to engage in cleanup at all. Report after report, errant filings, misplaced billings, repair requests, even some odd monetary checks placed in folders tangentially assigned to each specific black site. By the gods, she could spend years here looking at all these frayed threads spiraling into tempting strands to pull at, but she narrowed her focus. She needed to tie the commander to any of these errant oddities, and much to her dismay, she found many. None implicated the commander directly, but would have connections linking to him and his favorite little minion, even some with William's badge number associated with it. While she may have been biased in that she loved the man, she truly didn't believe he was capable of that sort of underhanded nature, given his rather infamous time with the custodial unit. The fact he was vetted and I need to get rid of one of these evens. Let's get rid of this even. The fact he was vetted and even well awarded in such a division of the NDA made the thought that he was complicit in the crime she was stumbling on hard to believe. No one who went through custodial ever talked about exactly what they did, but all noted the incredible lack of breathing room within the unit. It was only as she came to a new filing that she breathed a sigh of relief, as she noticed that William's badge was being used at a site in a manner most impossible. Agent Lowell was deployed on the West Coast at the time, a fact Samantha knew intimately because she had a crush on the man. It was also when he was injured during a training scenario, and she had personally visited him in the hospital to hand-deliver the well wishes from the others in La Pratia. This meant someone was intentionally using his badge and recordings to help obfuscate something, which naturally called into question all the badge numbers on the infected reports. Complacency was a truly insidious thing, and it was the brazen act of using false badge listings that would ensure the capital would get involved. Everything in these reports was dubious and would need to be thoroughly investigated, a task that was well beyond her at the moment. For now, she simply started taking recordings of each report before she filed them away back into the archives. It was only now she looked at the time and decided that a couple hours spent here was more than enough reprieve from her family. She wasn't looking forward to continuing her crash course in birding, but there were many pitfalls she needed to understand. She also understood why her mother had stopped talking with her about things even tangentially related to her bloodline when she joined the NDA all those years ago. She didn't know how best to square away the fact she wanted to continue with the NDA, and yet would be one of these bird people. Her mother had even demonstrated what she would look like, if not exactly, and it sprang up a bunch of new worries in her mind. Those worries were instantly thrown onto the back burner as she left the archive, only to be confronted directly by a terrible facsimile of a human. Agent Cooper gave a smirk and nodded his head to her, while leaning back against the wall opposite the door and still on his tiptoes. "Well, hello there, Miss Samantha Baker. What brings you into the archives on your days off, madam?" It was always the same greeting with the man, stating the full name and never anyone's designation within the NDA. "Morning, Agent Cooper. Just double checking some case details. Gonna head back out to take my folks for lunch to get some shopping in. What brings yourself here this morning, though? It was best to turn the question back around in an effort to help steer the conversation away from herself. Commander Thetis has me checking on some things as well. Say, you and William still going well? Samantha furrowed her brow and looked at him carefully before the man gave a chuckle. We are indeed. Thank you for asking. Good. Good, that is wondrous news. I wish you two a long and fruitful relationship. Samantha couldn't hide her discomfort and was already scooting towards the staircase to get back on the ground level. Well, that is the plan after all. As for yourself, I hope you have a good day, all right? The cretinous leech of a man gave a nod of his head and a stilted smile, drawn off to one side before he stepped past her. She in turn hurried up the stairs and away from him as quickly as possible, only casting a single glance back over her shoulder and noted the man was watching her depart. As he watched the woman leave, Jeffrey Cooper turned his attention to the archives room itself and stepped into the center. He then began to carefully inhale, taking in deep breaths before turning to follow his senses to the nearest filing racks and begin withdrawing folders. Each was given a sniff, and he began looking through them intently before the pieces started to slot into place, when he noticed some were cross-checking other files. Well, Commander Thetis would be very pleased with him, perhaps enough so to give him another compliment. Again, laying out more clues, too. More clues for the reader to put things together. Alright, and now the final section before we finish off Chapter 13. A knock came at the heavy double doors before they parted and allowed entry into the lavish office. There, standing beside a newly installed flower bed, with his suit off and undershirt rolled to his elbows, was the man's father. It was only after the doors closed that the older man turned and gave a nod of his head. I take it you have news, son? This brought a smile to the man's face before he bowed his head and quickly offered out a folder. I do, Dad. The man from the clan holds, Theric, managed to dig up something. Originally, because the site was sold via government auction, and the bidder wanted to remain anonymous, we didn't have a way to reach out properly. This made Jeremiah Rossman slowly start to brush his hands of the soil he had worked with, and draw up a towel to clear them properly. He find the name? Samuel shook his hand slightly and gave a sigh as he continued to hold out the folder for his father, who snatched it soon after. Not as such. We have an alias, John Wolfwood. Now, it's not much to go on, but Theric began digging and has found other purchases made with the same name within the last 10 years. He asked some others to check citizenry records just in case, but he's looking into some of these other purchases already. The name made Jeremiah grumble some, and he looked over the folder's contents until at last he saw the picture. Is this a photo of the auction? Samuel nodded, and Jeremiah lifted it up and looked carefully. Can we place names to all the faces in it? Working on that as we speak, Dad. We'll narrow down the potentials of who Mr. Wolfwood or an associate of his are. Our best guess is this man right here. Samuel came up and pointed at the picture, showcasing a well-dressed man with black hair and gray eyes wearing a dark trench coat. Have our people keep our eyes out for the man. See if our contact at the NDA can get us a name while Mr. Theric works. Samuel didn't speak up, but just bowed his head in acknowledgement and turned to hastily leave the office. Jeremiah, though, kept looking at the photo, studying the man and those around him. He wasn't out of place in that trench coat, though it was an odd choice of fashion, due to the biting cold of winter when the auction was held. Most would not choose something so old-fashioned for dress, and indeed everyone else around him was wearing far more modern attire. This must have been near the start of the auction, just before they closed the doors to allow a closed bidder system. The focus of the picture itself was clearly a government official, one that Jeremiah recognized, the son of the son of Lapradia's mayor, who helped to host the auction itself. Perhaps he should give the lad a visit and see if he recognized the man as a local businessman. Regardless of how, be it the NDA, Theric, or his own means, he had pinned down the identity of this John Wolfwood. His very fate depended on it. And that is the end of chapter 13. That was chapter 13, Converging Paths. That is the end of it. Yeah, chat, we made it! We made it! Chapter and a half. We did it. Woo. All right. Woofda. Yeah. So again, we know, because you guys have meta knowledge, we know that Jeremiah Rossman, we know what he's up to. But I'm hoping for the reader, they'll be like, okay, they're putting the pieces together of like, so the NDA is directly working with Everglade, Jeremiah Rossman, who's here at Extract. They might not know Everglade specifically. They do know Everglade has now purchased Samantha Baker's father's work. So remember, her father worked at a lumber yard. The lumber company has now been bought by Everglade. And that was a little while back. This will coincide with an event that comes later in the book, where they bought the lumber yard specifically to hide their Mikander, who is Ithander. They're hiding him down in the basements at the lumber yard itself for his protection. Because remember, Ithander was there at the incident where the convergence point was corrupted, destabilized, and basically imploded. And so we have a Mikander that has essentially been split in half. He has his physical body here, and his spiritual body is in the other side, and he's having some wild troubles. He's having troublies. So, Jeremiah Rossman, and Everglade, they need a new convergence point so that they could try to refuse their Mikander back together. Oh my goodness. Alright. Yeah, chat, how'd you like it? How'd you like going through? Like I said, these were the next chapter 2 is gonna be another heavy one to like have to rewrite, but yeah. So Spirit is kind of having an out-of-body experience. Neat. Yep. Right, now does it all flow together properly? Like, can you understand why William would come to the conclusion he came to about everyone being in cahoots inside the diner? It's stuff like that. Those are the kind of things I hope it's made a logical, like, he's not just wildly jumping to conclusions, right? He has his reasons why. And again, reasons like things he recalls. Like, he remembers Michael sniffing him. This waitress sniffed him, and then she said something incredibly odd about his scent. Declared it, in fact. So, I want to make sure that people understand these aren't jumping to conclusions. Like, he's putting together the pieces, tangential connections as they may be. He's putting together the pieces to come up with evidence. Which is how he figures out that, yeah, everyone in here is likely in on the same thing. Alright. Well, chat, we're going to watch a vidya now. And we're going to talk about it because this video is from Mythical Wukong. It's Why Werewolves Are Terrible Predators. From Mythical Wukong. I am super curious.
Hey guys,
I full screened you and you instantly activated. Okay. Now, again, I am curious. What werewolves is he talking about? What mythos are you going with? What sort of methodology? What are the actual things, right? That title sounds rage baity. Again, it could be entirely accurate. I don't know which one of the things he works with, right? I don't know what werewolf he's specifically talking about. Is he talking about Twilight werewolves? Is he talking about underworld werewolves? Is he talking about old, like, Germanic werewolves? Or is he talking about old Roman werewolves? Like, what werewolf are you talking about in particular? You know what I mean? There are too many of them with too many differences between them, so I don't know what they're be talking about. But first, chat, I'm going to the bathroom. Yeah. I'll be right back. I'm back. I'm here. All right, chat. All right. We're gonna start. Calm down, everybody. We're gonna start. So it's 14 minutes and 19 seconds long, and we will see what one again because I have no idea. There are so many differing. It's the same thing with vampires, right? There are so many differing mythos and legends and types. That which one are you talking about? Are you talking about like the soul vampires from Madagascar? Are you talking about like Bram Stoker's vampires? Are you talking about World of Darkness vampires? Like, you know what I mean? There are so many different types. Yes, or are you talking about Twilight vampires? Sparkle, sparkle! You know what I mean? Or are you talking about Japanese vampires, which are hilarious because they pogo jump everywhere. Fucking funny as shit. Like, again, there are so many, right? Like, it's the same thing with werewolves, right? Like, which ones are you talking about? Are you talking about ones with mystical powers or without? Are you talking about ones with connections to nature or without? Are you talking about ones with control of themselves or without? You know? Like, because those all dramatically change things. So let's get into it and find out, shall we?
Hey guys, I've been doing some of this thinking stuff again. And I believe if a werewolf is chasing you, you're probably having one of the worst nights available to the human experience. I mean, maybe not the worst, but it's a competitive pick. Imagine yourself walking home. It's quiet, maybe a little too quiet. And then something moves in the back of your eye. You try not to overthink it, but you can't help the goosebumps. It's too fast to be a person, and too heavy to...
Okay, well, now you're specifically showing Black Spiral Dancers. So, you're specifically showing Black Spiral Dancers, alright? They are Gauru in World of Darkness. They don't obey, like, they don't need a full moon, they don't need it to be nighttime, they don't need anything like that. They are what they are, and they're also evil as fuck, right? These are like super satanic monster wolves. Okay, these are Smilers. It's essentially what a Smiler it would be. They are, the deeper down they are, they're barely sentient. They are just monsters.
be a dog. And when you decided that panicking is appropriate, it's already over. That's what makes werewolves work so well in the moment. They hit fast, hard, and they feel like a human nightmare that suddenly grew claws. But if I zoom...
Okay, that's funny. I'll say that's funny.
They hit fast...
The fucking werewolf drive-bying a vampire.
Fast, hard, and they feel like a human nightmare that suddenly grew claws. But if I zoom out of that...
That's funny. Alright, hold on there.
A confrontation, past panic and blood, and the very dramatic moonlighting, werewolves have a huge problem. They are terrifying predators for about 10 minutes.
Again, you're making an overgeneralized statement. What specific mythos are you going with?
After that, everything actually starts going wrong. Because the real question isn't whether a werewolf is strong or could kill you. Obviously it could. But the interesting question is whether a creature like that could keep surviving for long without starving, recklessly exposing itself, getting hunted down, or turning its own food supply into more competition.
What? Again, especially if you're going to show World of Darkness. What are you talking about? Like, you know they have control of their form, right? So again, what mythos and legends are you working with? What are you talking about? If you're talking World of Darkness, like, I'm not even talking about my style of werewolf, right? If you're talking about World of Darkness, they can literally conceal themselves on a whim. They don't need any special, like, they don't need special moonlight or darkness or anything like that. Look, you're even showing that they're fighting a red talon here in the day.
Which brings me to my claim that werewolves are far from their perfect hunter depiction, and are actually the least sustainable predator design fantasy has ever fallen in love with. So give me a...
Yeah, you're gonna have to do a lot of work here because you've already fucked up with like how do they keep themselves hidden? Well, that's simple. You have a humanized form, and again, what mythos are you working with? Are you talking about ones that don't have control of themselves, or the ones that do have control of themselves? Then yeah, they choose when to change. They're not beholden to the whims of anything else, but to themselves. Okay, so he's talking about the infectious bite then? Bothering the town results in a gang of werewolves? I don't know.
Second to present my case, because I'm not just going to rant that werewolves are bad monsters. They are not. Honestly, it's the opposite. But they just work way better in specific ways. But that's for later in the video.
Again, I also hate your character design. I'm not gonna lie. Your character design is awful.
The easiest way to see their flaws is to compare them to the monster they always get paired with. Vampires.
Again, what mythos of vampire are you talking about?
Vampires are dangerous because they are patient. They hide, choose their moments, feed with control. They can basically live right next to human society, and in a lot of stories survive specifically because nobody can fully prove they exist.
That's the same exact thing. That's the same exact thing werewolves can do. Like, what are you talking about? Again, what we need to know, what mythos are you talking about? Like, what kind? You know? Mind flayers are worse by the metrics he provided. Yeah, because they literally can't hide themselves. Werewolves can. You have a human form as a werewolf, right? And again, are you talking about the ones that can control themselves as well? Because then that destroys your argument. They can be as patient as they want. They don't need to eat. In fact, with a lot of vampire mythos, they can only sustain themselves on blood, and other forms of sustenance harm themselves. Well, he hasn't made his case for what he's arguing for.
A truly smart vampire does not want attention, it only wants access. But a werewolf survives by turning into a 7-foot public incident and hoping nobody starts connecting the unusually shredded dots. That
Okay. Well, one, you're also talking about specifics. You're talking about smaller werewolves too, not big ones, not like Gauru, which are much bigger.
difference, unsurprisingly, matters a lot. But that's not even the main reason I'm arguing for. But comparing the two monsters shows that a vampire is built for long-term predation. It can feed without always killing. It can
Werewolves can eat normal food. You don't have to eat people. Werewolves don't require specific food source. Vampires do. Vampires require blood. Werewolves can be fucking vegans for all they give a shit about. It's so long as their body sustains itself. They don't require the predation of people either. They can go eat animals. In a lot of mythos, animals don't work for satiation of the blood curse of vampires. So again, what mythos are you comparing to what mythos?
disappear after feeding, and it can stay close to its food source because secrecy is part of its strategy.
A werewolf can live in the woods. They can be a hunter out in the woods. What are you talking about?
Werewolf is built for burst predation, huge output, huge risk, and huge exposure.
No, they're not. Again, but what? They aren't though. I need to know what kind of werewolf are you talking about? What kind? You're showing stuff like the Gauru from World of Darkness or Twilight, where they don't require that at all. They could change on their own terms when they want to. They could be as patient as they want. And if we're talking about in terms of wolf, if they take more of the wolf identity, they can go long periods of time without feeding. Wolves are great at feast and famine. Like, wolves can actually eat 25% of their body weight in food at once. And then they hold on to it and store it. So, like, what are you talking about? I know, he's not explaining his criteria. He's making claims and not showing evidence. So I'm already really dubious. We're only 2 minutes in, too.
The
Jesus.
whole design screams short-term violence.
No, it doesn't. Again, maybe if you're thinking of it as the big bad scary monster, but if you're thinking of it like, I've stalked this person for days or hours, I know their route, I will switch here in the woods or when they're in their most secluded area, snatch them and take them away, and then devour them. Like, that doesn't have to be short term at all.
But sadly not long-term survival. And
again, you make the claim, but you don't have any evidence. You're basically covering the average video you'd get when you were a stag co-host, yeah.
Burst predators have lots of problems. The first one is so iconic that most werewolf stories accidentally normalize how bad it is.
Okay, so now, then you need to stop doing all the Twilight ones. You need to stop showing all Twilight, stop showing all the Gowru, stop showing all the old Roman myths, stop showing a lot of the old Germanic myths. Like, you have now fully fucked yourself on what you're talking about. You now have to discard down to the silliest myths, which are the European myths where they're trying to demonize wolves, not werewolves. It's the whole fear of wolves that Europe was obsessed with.
Full moon is an awful hunting schedule. It's great for folklore, but it's terrible for an actual predator. Predators...
again, because the moon was associated in it because of lunacy, right? That was the whole point of the whole fear Europeans had, and no one knows why, but Europeans had a deep fear of wolves. For some reason. Nobody knows why. Nobody knows, like, where it fully developed from. You can make some assumptions, like if a rabies outbreak happened and then the wolves would be ravenous. A lot of people point out that because the Black Plague happened and people were throwing dead bodies right outside of city limits, they were just throwing them over the walls, wolves would come over and eat the dead bodies of the plague victims, and this would then bring them in contact with people more and more often.
Want control. They want to choose when to hunt, where to hunt, how often to risk injury, and how much energy to spend. A classic werewolf gets...
So, again, now you've just now fucked your argument, because now you're saying a classic werewolf, classic only to European fables. Not to the Russians, not to the old Germanic lores, not to the old Roman lores, not to the Gowru you're literally showing right here on screen, not to Twilight, which you've also shown on screen. Like, you're already fucking your own argument over because you have now given statements that where you were talking in general broad strokes, and now you're trying to get specific, and that specificity actually ruins your argument. Holy shit.
It's none of that. It gets a lunar alarm clock from hell. That creates 3 obvious problems.
God, and again, your character design here is absolutely atrocious. It really is. Yeah, if we're going generic, it's also a curse. It's a cursed thing that spreads through bite, or sometimes through claw swipes and everything. So it gets worse and worse as it goes on. It's more like a zombies system. If we're talking about, and so then again, if we go with genericized vampires, they can't attack holy figures, they can't go inside people's houses, they can't cross rivers. Like, when it rains, the vampires literally drown? Again, you're talking about how perfect the predation of vampires are, using genericized thing. Part of genericized lore for vampires is the fact that they can't even cross a fucking river. Any sort of moving water hurts them and kills them. This is just the CalArt style Wukong. It's hideous. It genuinely is hideous.
The first is predictability. If humans
Again, if you're talking very specific sub niche, yes.
know when werewolves are active, they would adapt. They lock doors, travel in groups, arm themselves, avoid forests, roads, and isolated farmhouses. They prepare silver if the setting uses silver. They chain up
Now you're just saying, oh, they prepare silver if it uses silver. So you know the fact that silver isn't always a universal. So why are you now declaring a universal for full moon when that's not a universal for most of werewolf mythos?
suspected victims if the world has figured the condition out.
By the way, the most dangerous time for at night is actually the gibbous moon, not the full moon. The full moon is bright enough for people to see. The gibbous moon is dark enough to blind a normal person, but allow creatures with night sight the ability to see as if it's daytime. That's why the gibbous moon is dangerous. And also why I specifically, not just their association closely with the full moon, but that's also why I made them warriors in my setting.
They would organize watches and set traps. A creature that hunts on an actual public calendar is not an unknowable predator.
Again, only if you use the certain mythos you're doing. You made all these other claims and you showed a bunch of stuff from mythos that don't have that. You've even showed the Elder Scrolls, which doesn't have the lunar calendar thing.
That makes werewolves scarier as
Again, you're showing Elder Scrolls right here in the video right now, which completely negate your argument. You need to now immediately take out everything that goes counter to what you've said. All the visual footage you've used.
superstition, but worse as animals. Animals do not benefit from giving their prey a monthly prep day.
I hate to tell them how wolves actually work, but you know that wolves are on a very specific schedule of mating seasons, right? And that also coincides with their type and style of predation in the wild. They actually change how they hunt based off of the mating season in and of itself.
The second problem is feeding rhythm. If the werewolf only fully emerges on certain nights, then its feeding opportunities are limited unless the human body is somehow covering the energy bill the rest of the month. That means one of
Whoa, no. Now you've just made another assumption. Hold on. Whoa. He just wildly jumped a new one. Feeding. They have to feed their entire sustenance for the entire month in that one night. No, they don't. Where did you ever see that? Ever. In any of the mythos. They're normal people. For all the rest, even the ones that are curse afflicted with the monthly thing with the full moon, even the ones that are curse afflicted can have normal foods. They eat normal foods. Hell, the joke in Ginger Snaps is the fact that she just buys a bunch of meat at the store and eats it. Like, holy shit, dude. This is a disaster. This video is terrible.
two things is happening. Either the werewolf form is expected to eat enough in a very short window to justify an absurd metabolic event, which is a lot to ask even from a giant predator.
It's not, because again, wolves can eat 25% of their body mass in one sitting.
Or the human form is already constantly feeding and storing resources, meaning the werewolf transformation is basically cashing in on a body that has been subsidizing monster mode in secret.
Yes. In the mythos you were specifically talking about, the monthly one where it's the full moon needed, that's exactly what's happening. Every time. The full moon, because it's not at their own whim, again, you've discounted so many other ones where it was at their own whim and choice already. It's fucking absurd. It's wild. Ugh. Kind of gave up on them because I reached a point I can read the vibe already by title and thumbnail. Again, if he had made argumentation specifically talking about the most specific mythos versus most specific mythos, but then I would immediately counter his vampire thing, be like, so the blood hunger, the desperation in it, where they are required to feed, they can't be like the patient predators you talk about. And what about where they literally lose control once they start consuming blood and they have to finish it? And the vampires actually require blood all the time? Because it's also a curse? Really, at the start of the video, you need to define your terms and just say, I'm using B-roll for my footage. It's not an example. To the point with one particular YouTuber when someone talks out of their ass and I don't even bother to continue watching it all. Yeah.
Neither option
Rough.
is really elegant, but at least there's space for an explanation. But the third problem is quite severe. It's opportunity. Real predators do not enjoy waiting for celestial scheduling. They hunt when prey is available, when conditions are favorable, when hunger demands it, or when offspring need food. A werewolf then has to become active according to moon phases, loses flexibility.
Again, which is the minority of cases. It's become a majority of modern media, and not even all modern media, right? You have Underworld here. Underworld doesn't require it. Underworld requires the first change of the full moon, and then you can change whenever you fucking want.
And flexibility is one of the best things a predator can have. That's actually one of the reasons Harry Potter's versions of lycanthropy works better than a lot of people give it credit for. Remus.
No, it doesn't. It's actually really bad. Now he's bringing up the Harry Potter version. No, the Harry Potter version of lycanthropy is actually really stupid.
Lupin's condition is treated like a recurring biological and social catastrophe. There's preparation, medication, fear of failure, containment, and real consequence if anything goes wrong. The full moon actually makes his life structurally worse. The Wolfman does the classic version beautifully for folklore, but that's exactly...
Again, you say folklore, but then it's only taking from a small subsect of the folklore. You're not even getting into the whole fae thing. Oh my god, you're not even getting into the whole fae thing. Jesus Christ, if we bring fae into it, Jesus. Werewolves get wild when it comes to fae business.
the point. It works because it feels like a curse. And Van Helsing gives you explosive, visually intense werewolves. And those are great for action, but they feel like something that dominates a short scene, and not something that could maintain a stable hunting strategy for years.
Okay, why? Why can't the Van Helsing ones maintain a stable hunting strategy? They don't need the full moon. They don't need the full moon to change. Dude. And remember, the werewolves we saw in Van Helsing were specifically being manipulated by a vampire in order to hunt when they didn't want to. Holy shit.
So right from the start, the werewolf already has a scheduling problem. However, it actually
God, your character is so fucking hideous, dude. Get it off the screen, please.
gets way worse once you look at the body itself. Because the transformation itself is terribly expensive. I feel like this part gets skipped because people are so used to the visual of bone cracking and body.
Is it painful? Yes. Again, if you have control over it, you can dictate when and where it happens.
Stretching that they stop asking the most basic question. Isn't that a crazy burden on the body? A werewolf.
Please tell me you know that werewolves, please tell me you know at least werewolves. In all of the mythos that have werewolves, they talk about the crazy regenerative and durability things that werewolves have. Where they can tank fucking ludicrous damage.
Both transformation is not a small costume change. Bones lengthen, muscle mass expands, teeth and claws grow. The skeleton shifts shape, the face restructures, skin stretches, tears, heals. Senses intensify, body temperature probably changes.
Again, you're now also using Twilight again when they don't need the full moon.
Neural processing gets redirected towards aggression, hunting, and sensory overload. That's an insane amount of biological work. Bodies are expensive even when they're doing normal body things. Healing a broken bone burns up to 20% more calories than
My brother in Christ. Are you really going to do this? So are we going to talk about vampires and their ability to go through like mist form and shit like that? And how many calories will that burn? Are you kidding me with this? Part of their supernatural ability is regenerative capabilities. They are like Wolverine, for God's sakes.
normal. Growing muscles, recovering from illness, those things are already really expensive. Rebuilding yourself into a murder engine in a matter of hours, if not minutes, is not something you pay for with a sandwich and a difficult childhood. So either the werewolf is gaining mass during the transformation, which opens up a fun nightmare question about where that mass is coming from.
It doesn't, though. Again, you can explain the conservation of mass elsewhere. Like you can also be that's why they hunt when they change, because they're burning through all those calories, and that's why they need to replenish the calories they lost.
Or it's rearranging the same body into a new form, which still costs huge amounts of energy while keeping hard physical limits in place. If the
Dude, I hate people like this so much. I hate people like this where they just make assertions and they don't have any evidence to back it up.
werewolf gains mass from nowhere, then fine. Your setting is invoking supernatural fuel. But then the transformation is even more dependent on a curse or a magical process than on biology.
No shit! You're already using the full moon! The requirement requires a curse or magical things! Oh my god. This guy is retarded. Chat, this guy might actually be retarded. He's already limiting them to be enforced usage of a magical or supernatural capability through the moon, which, again, the thing you're showing here on screen is a black spiral dancer, which does not need the moon to do anything. And yes, they are supernatural creatures.
If the werewolf does not gain mass, then it's reshaping a finite amount of material into a more weaponized form, which means its actual size and power have tighter limits than stories often like to admit. Either way,
Stop. Don't show World of Darkness where it's actually a supernatural thing.
there's story depth. And that would also mean that the werewolf doesn't just hunt because it enjoys violence or because the curse wants blood. It hunts because its body just spent a ridiculous amount of resources turning itself into a monster, which would actually explain werewolves often show impulsiveness a bit better. That's another place where the vampire comparison is useful. A vampire is efficient. It feeds with relatively little physical restructuring. It gets in, extracts calories.
Okay, again, so now you are cutting out all of the mythos where they do actually undergo dramatic transformation. Okay. Fucking rules for thee, but not for me. This is what happens when you go in with a predisposed thing of which one is better, instead of looking at the positives and negatives of them in totality. Yes, that's very arbitrary. Transform into a giant bat? Nah. Transform into mist? Nah. Transform into any, like, animals? Nah. Let's not talk about any of those. It doesn't fit my narrative. Like, holy fuck. Holy fuck, dude.
Or blood or life force, depending on the setting, and gets out. A werewolf first turns itself into a high-performance meat.
And again, look at the current thing he's showing literally in front of us right now. Look at it. He's literally showing a vampire transforming in front of us into a monster.
Vehicle, and then has to recover the cost of becoming one. That's not really elegant predator design, but it could be fun. And when a creature is paying that kind of internal cost, the next thing it absolutely cannot afford is attention. Well, too bad werewolves are terrible at hiding.
No, they aren't. Again, what mythos are you talking about?
The unwritten predator rule is that predators survive by managing risk. Even
Okay, I'll hear out this statement.
top predators avoid unnecessary fights because an injury is expensive in terms of energy and burden on the body.
Incorrect. I'm gonna already tell you incorrect. Fights between packs, fights between laughs and gangrel. I know, right? Fights between packs, fights for territory. All that shit happens. You would argue they're unnecessary because why don't they just move elsewhere? No, if your food source is there, this fight is entirely necessary. Like, it's why it's why wolf packs get into actual wars with each other. Hell, you don't even need to be a predator for that. Just look at fucking monkeys and gorillas and orangutans and shit like that who get an actual armed conflict with each other. Like, no, you're just wrong on this point. This is the whole thing of like, why would the Mollies and the Creek, I think it was the River Creek pack, come and attack the Druid Peak pack if they were trying to avoid unnecessary fights? It's because the Druid Peak pack had the best hunting grounds. They wanted those hunting grounds. And once Wolf 21 was dead, once M21 was gone, or 21M was gone, the literal king of wolves, they saw an opportunity to take the hunting grounds. So they declared war against the Druid Peak pack. The Mollies got beaten back, but the Creek, because the Druid Peak was already hurting from the Mollies and from a disease, the Creeks moved in, and they managed to take out most of the Druid Peak pack, so they had to retreat. They lost their territory.
A broken limb, a torn tendon, or an infected wound can kill a hunter just as effectively as starvation. So good predators are selective. Werewolves, at least in most stories,
Again, you're now caveating again, at least in most stories. No, actually, in the majority of stories, they're not.
behave like species designed by adrenaline. And
Again, in most stories, they are not. We talk about old Roman mythos, old German mythos, old Russian mythos. And we talk about, like, World of Darkness, which you keep showing. If we talk about the thing right in fucking front of you, Van Helsing now, they were being forced into those fights by the vampire who transformed into a giant monster. Are you fucking kidding me?
they leave tracks, blood, and witnesses, which causes stories and attracts hunters.
Whoa, no. Again, now you've already made another new assumption. They don't have to. If they go killing stuff in the woods, it's gonna look like an animal attacked it. Why would they then attract stories and hunters specifically for that? It's like, oh, the wolves got another creature. Okay. I think nobody's ever heard of a vampire. Oh my god. Yeah. Good thing he's also talking about very specific vampires that work for his narrative and not all of actual vampire mythos where they lose control when they feast. No.
That makes sustained survival difficult,
A deer was badly mauled on the road. It's werewolves. I know, right?
especially in any setting where humans are competent enough to notice patterns. Repeated livestock deaths, unusually torn corpses.
You understand that livestock deaths can be any sort of predation. Oh no, we better go get the coyotes. Oh no, what about the jackals? Oh no, the hyenas. Oh no, foxes. Like, depending on what type of livestock you're talking about. If you're talking about sheep, like, a fox will have a go at a sheep. Oh no, my chickens. My chimkins. My chimkins. Damn foxes.
Deep claw marks. And add that to a monthly cycle,
Bears. Bears.
local disappearances, and people hearing something far too large moving through the forest, and werewolves are not hard to believe in. That's why
Dude, you are making so many fucking assumptions. This is wild.
Underworld works better when it treats lichens as already exposed and locked into open conflict. because that solves the secrecy problem by giving up on secrecy entirely. Teen Wolf, surprisingly, gets around some of this by integrating werewolves socially and emotionally, which actually helps a lot. A creature that can control itself and remain embedded in society has a much better shot than the classic Berserker version.
Are you fucking kidding me? Let me give a counterexample. One of the thousands of counterexamples to what I just said. And you picked Teen Wolf, especially. Oh my god. Why didn't you pick World of Darkness? You kept showing off fucking World of Darkness all the time. You kept showing off the Galru. You do understand that they can walk and talk and interact with humans just like normal, too. Good lord.
The Witcher handles werewolves well when it keeps them local, tragic, and tied to curse logic. Because one werewolf haunting one region is believable, but a thriving secret werewolf predator population roaming around every month, without the entire world adapting around it is much harder to buy. And then there's a very underrated overlooked problem, the prey choice problem, because werewolves are usually shown hunting humans.
Are you fucking kidding me? Are you fucking kidding me? He did it. We've done it. We've gone the full assumption gambit. The full assumption gambit. We're all the way there. What do you think vampires have to do, you dumb fuck? Vampires, in most mythos, vampires have to hunt people. In most mythos for werewolves, they can hunt anything. They can eat normal foods. In most mythos for vampires, the normal foods turn to ash within their mouth because it is a punishment. They have to hunt humans. Oh my god. The Witcher world is just lousy with monsters. The werewolf's kills can be 24 other monsters, not the local miller's dark secret. Yes.
Humans are objectively bad prey. They're not bad prey because they're physically hard to kill. They are bad prey because of what happens after the kill. Humans live in groups.
No. Already you're incorrect. There are hermits. There are hunters. There are trappers. There are all kinds of people. Just fuck all the people in Siberia then, right? Humans live in groups. They don't have to. Holy shit. You also aren't required. You aren't there is I don't know any werewolf mythos where the requirement is actually to kill people. The requirement is just to eat, to sustain themselves, right? Any meat works. Horses, chickens, cats, dogs, it doesn't matter. Meat is the meat.
They communicate danger. They investigate deaths. They
investigate deaths, meanwhile specifically showcasing this quest where they aren't investigating the deaths. They just want to assign it to a random person. Well done.
organize revenge. They use traps, fire, dogs, silver, folklore, and increasingly annoying teamwork. A predator that actually hunts humans is starting a social chain counter-reaction. If it kills one village...
So the werewolves, again, you've already limited it massively. If you have any sentience as a werewolf, just don't hunt a human then. Wow, I've just entirely destroyed your argument.
The whole village starts sharpening things. That's why man-eaters in real life become famous so quickly. Because human hunting...
No, whoa, no, whoa, hold on. Pause, massive timeout. Do you understand how fucked the whole man-eater thing actually is? Also, are you talking about modern day? Because in the olden times, they would assign any troubles to the local wolves, or the local bear, or the local saber-toothed cat. Or the big-toothed cats. Like, are you fucking kidding me?
Predators trigger an organized response. A smart predator wants prey that gives good energy for low risk. Humans are high-risk prey because humans escalate. And the worst part...
Are you fucking kidding me? Again, when you don't have a choice, you don't have a choice.
Part is that I don't even give equivalently high energy when slain. So if I'm trying
No, 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 no. Hold, whoa, whoa, hold up,
energy
hold
for
up.
low risk, humans are high risk prey because humans escalate. And the
Again, you are assuming a lot that this isn't a lone human out in the woods by themselves, or like where nobody's gonna find them. That they don't consume the entirety of the person, because remember, wolves can eat 25% of their body mass in food in one sitting. If a werewolf has anything similar to that level, do you want to know how much they could stuff down their gullet and leave with? By the way, that is why werewolves in my setting can actually stuff a lot of fucking food down their gullet. It's why gluttony can be a problem. Holy fuck, man.
worst part is that I don't even give equivalently high energy when slain.
Again, what are you talking about? How? How does a human not give the equivalent in mass to that of any other prey that gets killed? Predator or prey species, does not matter. A pound of human would give the same as a pound of rabbit, as a pound of deer, as a pound of elk. What are you talking about?
So if I'm trying to imagine a werewolf behaving like an actual optimized predator, it probably does not prioritize humans most of the time. It will go for livestock, deer, and maybe isolated prey. But full-on werewolf eats townspeople every month is not predator logic.
No shit, that's the curse. You already backed yourself into this corner of needing the curse, and thus getting rid of what, like 80% of werewolf mythos? You backed yourself into this corner, and now you're thinking, well, now if I actually think of them as a predator, I'd probably use the rest of the mythos instead of the mythos I forced myself into because I wanted to glaze vampires for some reason. Like, what the fuck? Meanwhile, he also cuts out most vampire mythos because that would also fuck him over. Like the inability to approach a holy man, the inability to stand in the sight of God, the inability to cross streams, to drown in the literal rainstorms, the inability to tell which way is up, for God's sakes. Literally, in old vampire folklore, if you buried the corpse facing down, the vampire would dig themselves to hell and die. Because they couldn't turn around and dig up. They can't tell up or down. Like, holy shit.
That's curse logic. It is narrative logic and folklore punishing civilization with something animal-shaped.
Yeah, and you specifically chose that, you moron.
Because the problem with eating humans is that humans tend to take it personally. No idea why.
Are you fucking kidding me?
And one
You force these logical mistakes. Let me ignore most werewolf mythos, force a bunch of logical mistakes onto this, like force them, and then gaslight more without actually providing evidence for anything I'm saying. And then keep showing counterexamples on the fucking screen towards what we're talking about.
once we get to werewolf bites, the whole design starts looking a bit over the top. The werewolf bite is one of those ideas that is brilliant for horror, and a proper mess for ecology.
It's a curse. You forced us into the curse corner. You didn't force us into the old mythos where werewolves are their own species. Like, what about Welsh werewolves, where they're literally the guardian spirits of nature, and they literally work with the Fae to protect the wilds? Like, holy shit, dude. You have forced us down into the 10% of werewolf mythos to fit your narrative and cut out everything else. Oh my god. Oh my god,
If
Jeff.
every
Oh my god.
successful attack can create another werewolf, then the werewolf is reproducing by turning prey into more predators. On paper, that sounds terrifying. But in practice, it is population management by meltdown and just making its own hunts harder.
How is it making its own hunts harder? Hold on.
Because more werewolves mean more competition and also more visibility, panic.
Okay. More werewolves means more competition. Yeah, who will then turn more werewolves and make more. And then when you become the majority in an area, do you see the problem? If you spread by bite, which is a curse, the curse sign, it's like the zombie plague, right? Only now you don't have a zombie that, and even let's take even Romero zombies where they can run and sprint, right? Like now you don't have something that can just sprint. You have something that can tear through doors and lift up cars and flip them over and shit. Like, holy fuck. Also, I don't know where this werewolves or loners thing comes from. It's like the two species that they're a combination of, wolf and man, are known for being socialized creatures. So why would werewolves be notorious? Why would werewolves suddenly be loner? Why wouldn't they make their own pack? Like you even showed in Teen Wolf where they literally are making a pack.
And hunters, and ecologically more consumption pressure on local prey, and more chances for unstable individuals to expose themselves to humanity. If the
Okay.
infection spreads easily, the setting starts having a werewolf outbreak. That can actually be a great story, but it's not a stable predator model. If the infection spreads rarely, then werewolves remain anomalies, which works much better. You get tragedies, bloodline storylines, local disasters, and social paranoia without instantly creating a self-destructive population boom. That's another way vampires and werewolves diverge. An optimized and smart vampire does not turn every meal. Too many
Again, depending on the lore, every kill by a vampire turns them into more vampires. Again, it's all lore dependent. What mythos are you working with? You keep giving the worst mythos to the werewolf, and then you negate all the mythos where vampires turn on bite. Like it was so common in vampire mythos that being bitten by a vampire made you a vampire that most media had to say like, dude, you don't have to worry about making another vampire if you bite them. That's modern reinterpretations of it.
vampires wreck secrecy and crash the food supply. Werewolves have the same issue, but worse, because their new recruits are usually unstable, visible, and much harder to control. So the bite works
Again, you are making assumptions only on this, and now you're literally showing a setting where they don't grow by bite, they are their own species.
best when lycanthropy behaves like a disease and a curse, or a rare transmission event, not as a wildly successful reproductive strategy.
So my retarded statement, I have now disproven my retarded statement. Thank you. No shit. I'm like, what? And in most werewolf mythos, they don't. Like, what?
The Witcher can be a good example when werewolves aren't shown like a thriving species, and more like a very bad thing happening to a very unlucky person. Because a werewolf bite is not good reproduction. It is terrible population management. Now, to be fair, werewolves do have one advantage, and it's important to give them that, because otherwise the whole video is just a rant. They are wolf-like. Well, obviously, but wolves are not just scary because they have teeth. They are scary because they coordinate with their pet.
You just got done bloviating about how making more werewolves is a bad thing, and now you're going to talk about them. And also, they have one advantage. Again, only ignoring all the mythos where they literally are spiritual beings that work with nature and have their own mystical powers. Beyond just being a big, nigh unstoppable tank that can just soak up damage. Like Welsh werewolves, for example, or Welsh, Irish, kind of Celtic werewolves, as example, where they use spirits and have contracts with the Fae. They are almost Fae creatures in and of themselves. Okay. Oh my god.
They share information, test targets, and they reduce individual risk by dividing effort across the group. Pack hunting solves a lot of problems that solo predators struggle with. So,
Yes, agreed.
if
And you
there's
and you're showing World of Darkness where they work with packs. Yes.
a path to a more believable werewolf predator model, it probably runs through pack behavior. With a pack, the chance of prey escaping gets lower. Injuries are divided. Territory defense improves. The young or new werewolves can be protected. Information can be shared, which means the group can avoid unnecessary human encounters when it wants to, and overwhelm prey when it chooses.
Also, I like this one because this is showing the ravens and wolves working together, right? The ravens are nearby, waiting for the wolves to crack open the rib cages, stuff like that, to get to more of the juicy meats inside. And the ravens also were the ones that led the wolves here. And the wolves are like, okay, well, we'll crack them open, we'll get all of our food, and then you have like the eyes and stuff like that left over.
That alone makes the werewolf more viable. But of course, it creates a new problem. A pack is also easier to notice. The more werewolves act like wolves, the more optimized they become as predators. But the more werewolves gather in numbers, the harder they are to hide. That's the
Based on what? This is a very weird assumption that gets made, not even just in this video, but a lot of times, like, well, more numbers means hard to hide. Well, where are you trying to hide? Are you hiding out in like the farmlands and the forests, stuff like that? More numbers is really easy still to hide. The difficulty comes in how close are you to civilization, and not just any civilization. How close are you to a civilization that can record you, that can keep track of you, that can give accurate details of you? It's part of what the problem in my setting is that, like, technology is now ubiquitous. It's getting so ridiculous that even using the powers they have to, like, erase data, they can't get the data that goes out in a live stream. Like, they can get the source of it and maybe stop the live stream, but all that data that's already gone out, it's already out. It's out of their reach. Again, this seems like a very, like, this, I feel like this guy is from the city, right? Is from a city, and he doesn't realize how expansive the wilderness actually is. You know what I mean? It's that whole thing where people don't understand the size of the United States. Like, until you're actually in the United States and you do lots of travel or driving or think about it, right? Yeah, he might be Brit. He could be Brit, and that could explain a lot of his things. But then you'd think he would know, like, Celtic and Gaelic folklore of werewolves, but he doesn't. But yeah, so this is the whole thing of, like, do you understand how actually big and dense the wilderness is? Your backyard having 50 trees in it is not a forest make. That's a stand of trees. Forests are big. Holy shit, like, you see hang on, I should show Bloomington. That's a good picture. That's a good picture of one. I want to show this, and then I want to show a map. So you can realize how big this fucking forest actually is. Where's something that shows, like, I'm gonna need to, like, do something to kind of show distance here. But here we go. Here's Bloomington, Indiana. I need to show distance so you can understand how fucking big this map actually is. How big this forest actually is, right? This is all one forest, by the way. You have multiple different, like, national parks and forests in it, but it's all like a continuous thing. And then here's like a picture of one of them, right? Do you understand how big that is? Oh, they don't. Europeans don't have inherent knowledge of history anymore. We all know why. Yeah, I mean, that's true. But again, you have a pack of werewolves in this. And this isn't even counting all the stuff to the sides here or behind or anything. You have a pack of werewolves in here. Good luck. Good luck. Look, here, you can see, even here, here's a car down here, right? This is an SUV. Good luck. This is a big place. I wish there was hey, let's see. What's a way to kind of show this? It's like, is there a way to kind of show the size of like what this is? Because this map, even this map gives kind of like a wrong impression. Because I'm like, oh, it's only forest here. It's like, I need you to understand how big this is and how all these little mini stands of trees everywhere. These are entire counties. Okay? Counties. That can be up to 100 miles across, easy peasy. Do you get how big? This is the Bloomington area. Do you get how big this really is? Do you understand how big this actually is? Of forestry. Okay? Some can ask, unironically, a day. I think you got auto corrected on this and it fucked over your sentence. I don't know exactly what you're trying to say in the sentence. All right? These are huge. Huge. Good luck. Again, it's the weird logic of one, that the werewolves have to hunt humans, which they don't. I don't know mythos that says they have to, whereas there's lots of vampire mythos that says they have to. Oh my god. 6.7 miles of just that one trail. Jesus. Hang on. Let me see. I need to see like a comparison that maybe a city folk would get. It spans over 204,000 acres. Is just the Bloomington one. Just the one specifically associated with the Hoosier National Forest is over 204,000 acres. So I need to get like how massive that is, because I'm specifically using the Indiana one because a lot of people don't think about the Hoosier National Forest. They think of Yellowstone, which is even bigger. Right? So in maybe miles? It's 318 miles. Well, 318.75, so it's about 319 miles. I need to get like in God. What's a good comparison? What's a good comparison here? Yeah, if you can go 319 miles in a day by walking, good lord, you are the fucking Terminator. I'm trying to think of like a good comparison. What's another good thing to be like to get like a city person to understand how big that is? Oh wait. Idea. So 319 miles. Okay. Okay. Here's a good idea. All right. Okay. So you know Long Island, right? Long Island, the part of that makes New York really fucking famous. Long Island. It's 118 miles. The forest, and you think about all like the parks and cities and skyscrapers that are in here in Long Island. The forest is almost 3 times as big. The forest. I'm hoping this is clear for people that are like city dwellers or things like that don't understand just how vast nature actually is. Like, and you want to talk about it's harder to hide. It's really not. Again, it all depends on where you're hiding. Where's your territory? That's not even an island, it's a peninsula. I know, right? It's a peninsula. But still, everybody knows, like, even people that aren't Americans kind of know Long Island, as an example. Hey, what's a way to do this? How big is Wales in miles? No, I don't want the entire landmass of Wales. I want from... Yes, there we go. Here we go. This is what I want. All right. Hold on. Wales. From the top of Wales to the bottom of Wales is 130 to 170 miles. The forest is 3 times bigger. Wales. Okay? The forest is 3 times bigger. Okay? Do you understand what I'm getting at here? From tip to tip, right? The forest is 3 of these from tip to tip. Okay? Not total area landmass, right? If we go to total landmass, then we'll get into all kinds of weirdness. But this is what I'm trying to explain. Like, it's big. Very, very big. That's why I don't like this whole thing of like it'll be harder to hide. Where are you hiding? If you're hiding inside the projects in New York City or something, sure, it'll be harder to hide a werewolf pack there. It'd be harder to hide a normal werewolf there. I get it. Understandable. If you are anywhere in the sticks, if you are in any part of nature, it is not harder to hide.
Predators. But the more werewolves gather in numbers, the harder they are to hide. That's the tension that makes them interesting.
Again, that statement is so dependent on not thinking about the context of anything, right? Harder to hide. Technically true, depending on where. If you are in the forests of, if you're in the Hoosier National Forest in Indiana, not harder to hide, or barely harder to hide. Like maybe like a 0.001% of a notch for every 10 werewolves. Like, if you are in Chicago or New York, like right there, maybe not even New York because Central Park, but if you are in Chicago, for example, sure, much harder to hide.
Teamwork helps them hunt, but teamwork also makes secrecy worse. Underworld also understands that lycans become more plausible once they're organized and not just purely feral. Even Twilight, for all the things people joke about, is interesting for this exact reason. Its wolf transformations are tied to social structure, territory, and group functions more than pure random blood frenzy.
But you already discounted these from existing because you forced us down the full moon path, where they have to do the full moon, which is a very small minority of actual werewolf folklore about this whole connection to the full moon. It's like the whole Vikings having horned helmets thing. It's like, they didn't.
So if I want werewolves to actually function for more than one dramatic attack, I need them to be less like movie monsters and more like organized predators with rules.
Are you fucking kidding me? Are you kidding me? I need them to be less like the retarded representation I forced them into and be more like the rest of their mythos that they actually are.
So if you judge them purely by long-term predator logic, they would be one of the sloppiest high-profile hunters fiction keeps reinventing. But that's...
No, they wouldn't. Again, you already cut out so much more of the mythos of werewolves specifically to go down one particular branch of mythos. I hate this. I hate this so much. I hate when people do this shit.
exactly why they work. Because actually, a werewolf is not scary in the same way a tiger is scary. A tiger is efficient. But a werewolf is wrong. It is a human body becoming the worst possible version of a predator.
It isn't. You actually reinforce that you don't know what you're talking about all throughout this. Again, you played so silly buggers and arbitrary with everything. You forced werewolves down to be your very specific definition of what a werewolf is, discounting all other mythos and lore and legends and folktales about what werewolves actually are. Constantly showcase ones like Twilight, as much as I hate Twilight, where werewolves don't behave in the way that you constantly arbitrarily say they do, while at the same time glazing vampires while cutting out all of their weaknesses and ways that they actually behave in their mythos. Like the fact they can't tell up and down as directions. Like, at all. That's how you can kill a vampire before it's even born. You bury them upside down. And when they dig their way out, quotes, they dig themselves to hell and kill themselves instead. They can't cross rivers. They can't stand in the face of God or the holy man. They can't handle rainstorms. They can't enter domiciles without being invited in. Like, they must consume blood from people and only people. Like, again, if you cut out everything, sure, you can make an argument for anything being the best or the worst if you literally ignore all the negatives or all the positives. Again, your only positive you gave werewolves was the fact that they can coordinate together. You didn't even think about the mythos where they have actual mystical powers, where they can swim beneath the ground as if the soil itself is water, where they can move from tree to tree, where they can merge with trees, where they can call down lightning storms or thunder, where they can puppet people. Like, if they touch people's shadows, they can puppet them. Like, you've negated so much werewolf mythos to specifically go down the curse route, and then you bemoan the fact that you've gone down the curse route. You did it to yourself, my dude. What a terrible video. Holy shit. Awful, genuinely awful video.
So if werewolves had to exist realistically, what do you think works best? Predators, diseases, or curses? Or something else entirely I completely missed to mention.
Something else entirely that you didn't know about, and again, your character
And if you
is
want
so
to,
hideous.
tell me which fantasy creature I should judge next from a biological perspective.
Holy shit, video essays. Yes, you are the prototypical video essayist. Make a lot of claims, not a lot of evidence, a lot of assertions, and just move on. What a god-awful video. Do not give Mythical Wukong any of your time. This is a truly diabolical video. Again, look, he's even doing it here. Vampires are patient, hidden, sustainable predators. Werewolves are basically the opposite. No, they aren't. Again, you don't know what the fuck you're talking about. You don't know the mythos for either of them, for God's sakes. Holy shit. What a god-awful video. What a truly terrible video. Oh my god. We have suffered. We have suffered watching this awful, awful presentation. This is what happens when you don't know what you were... Yeah, it was predictable. It was. I was curious if he would explain his methodology and which mythos he was going for. No, he just kind of did a hodgepodge of whatever the fuck came to his mind. And, like, I couldn't pick out an actual mythos he was going for with werewolves. Even in Hollywood. Like, I couldn't get... Based on the rules he was establishing, I couldn't figure out which mythos he was trying to ape as his problem. And then he kept showing counterexamples on screen. What is it with video essayists showing counterexamples to what they're saying on screen? What a god-awful video. Terrible, truly terrible video. Anyways, chat. Anyways. Thank you all so much for tuning in. It's greatly appreciated. Hope you enjoyed your time while you're here. We might do something weird tomorrow. Though, the ESO update is supposed to be today, right? I don't know with a lot of the weirdness going on. We'll see. So, yeah. Because, yeah, they got hit with a bunch of layoffs. And I'm actually really worried about ESO now. Like, it's July 8th today. Is the update actually in? We'll see. We'll see. In the meantime, though, chat, take care. Have a fantastic day. Stay safe and healthy. Get fit, get ripped, and I will see you tomorrow. And remember, on Saturday, we're watching Viking Wolf. Yep. Bye-bye, everyone. Yep. Bye-bye.